Imagine, for a moment, that the Earth is not merely a planet suspended in the quiet darkness of space, not simply rock, water, air, and fire in motion, but a living manuscript, a story written slowly and endlessly by the hand of time. Every layer of soil, every ripple in the sea, every gust of wind across a desert plain is a sentence in that story. Each mountain range is a paragraph of upheaval, and every living creature, from the smallest cell to the vast migrations of whales, is a word written in motion. The Earth in this way becomes something greater than an object. It becomes a storyteller, patient and unhurried, whose language is existence itself. And time, like a careful author, shapes each scene, revising, erasing, and adding new lines as the pages turn over eons. In the stillness of night, when stars scatter across the black ocean of the sky, the story becomes almost visible. The light that travels from distant suns to touch our atmosphere is older than our species, older than our mountains. That light arrives carrying memories, not memories in words, but in energy, in pattern, in rhythm. The same energy that burns in those stars hums in the atoms that build our bones, in the spark that lights our thoughts. We are, in truth, chapters of the same unfolding narrative, characters written into the book of the cosmos, made of the same sentences that form the galaxies. When we breathe, we are repeating the Earth's refrain: inhale creation, exhale memory. It is a rhythm so subtle, so vast, that most of us live our lives unaware that we are part of it. Yet the story continues whether we read it or not. Long before language, long before the first eyes opened to the sky, time began writing. Its first lines were silent gravity shaping dust into planets, heat melting stone into oceans of fire. Then came the cooling, the condensation, the delicate chemistry of chance. The story began to find its pulse in water, its syntax in the dance of molecules. The oceans became the ink, and light from the young sun became the quill. Life began as a whisper, a faint phrase carried in waves and currents, and from that whisper grew complexity, rhythm, colour, entire chapters of coral reefs, of forests, of movement and migration. Nothing was random. Everything belonged to a single, endless script, revised through storms and extinctions, through ice and fire, until meaning began to emerge in living form. When we walk across the ground, we walk upon a library. Beneath our feet are the imprints of creatures that lived and vanished millions of years before us. Their bones have turned to stone, their motion captured forever in layers of sediment that stretch deep into the past. Each fossil, each vein of mineral, each grain of sand was once part of a moment that passed and yet remains. Time, it seems, has no desire to forget it, only transforms. In that transformation lies the beauty of the Earth's story. Nothing truly disappears. It only becomes another chapter, another tone, another word in the language of change. And what of us, the latest line on the newest page? We are both readers and writers now. We inherit the story of the world, and we add to it with every breath, every action, every thought that ripples into the air. We carve into stone and record in code, but our deepest writing is unintentional. The shape we give to rivers, the warmth we add to the atmosphere, the way our presence echoes through the planet's rhythm. Some of what we write will fade, as all words do, and yet some will endure, absorbed into the living memory of the world. The wind that moves through our cities has touched the same oceans that carried the first life. It remembers all it has passed through. In this way, memory becomes continuity, and continuity becomes meaning. Time does not write quickly. Its handwriting is patient and elegant, carved into mountains, traced into the patterns of rivers, whispered in the spiral of a seashell. It does not erase in haste. It allows what has been to sink into what is, until both are inseparable. There is no final sentence, no last page. The story expands outward, infinitely, folding new layers of meaning into itself. The cosmos, too, reads and writes the movement of galaxies, the collapse of stars, the formation of new light, are all strokes of the same pen. Every particle moves according to a rhythm that began before time itself could be measured. To look at the stars is to look at words still forming, chapters still being written in fire. Perhaps this is why silence feels so profound. In silence, one can almost hear the pulse of the story, not in sound, but in sensation. The wind that moves through the grass is not empty. It is the voice of all that has been. The waves that rise and fall against the shore are the breathing of the world's memory. To listen to the earth is to hear a language beyond words, the slow music of transformation. We, as listeners, become aware that we are both subjects and storytellers, made of the same elements that form the narrative we inhabit. Every moment of awareness is another layer in the grand manuscript of existence. There is a strange comfort in knowing that the story will continue long after we are gone. The mountains will still shift, the rivers will still flow, the light will still find its way through the atmosphere to touch the surface of the sea. Even as humanity changes, evolves, and eventually fades, time will keep writing, perhaps with new forms, new rhythms, new eyes to see. The ink will never run dry because the ink is everything light, water, dust, and life. The story is not dependent on one species, one age, or one consciousness. It is the act of being itself, forever in motion, forever renewed, and yet, within this grand continuity, there is intimacy. The pulse of your own heart mirrors the rotation of the earth. Your breath echoes the rhythm of the tides. The atoms in your body were once part of stars that burned before the first oceans existed. You are not separate from the text of creation. You are a sentence within it, a living word carried forward through generations of time. Even your dreams, the quiet unfolding of thought in the night, are reflections of the greater dream, the earth's own dreaming, as it turns beneath a canopy of ancient light. To see the earth as a story is to see meaning in every moment, not the kind written in ink, but the kind that exists in rhythm and balance. The way light filters through leaves, the way snow falls in silence, the way the ocean gathers and releases, all are forms of communication, written without words yet understood by those who listen. In this way, learning to observe becomes a kind of reading. Each sunrise is a new paragraph, each nightfall a pause between thoughts. The seasons turn the pages, the wind carries the punctuation. The story is vast, but it is also immediate, existing in this breath, this heartbeat, this moment. And so, this introduction begins not with a beginning, but with awareness that we are standing inside a story already in progress. The earth is not finished. Time is not done. The writer's hand is still moving, quietly, across the face of the universe. If we close our eyes and listen, perhaps we can feel it, the faint vibration beneath the surface, the slow heartbeat of creation. That rhythm is not distant, it is within us. We are, each of us, the continuation of that story, readers who have become the ink and words who have learned to dream. 1. The whisper beneath our feet. Beneath the quiet world we know, under the soil and stone that supports our every step, there lies a realm of silence older than life itself. It is a place that few have seen and none have truly known. When you close your eyes and let your breath fall into rhythm with the slow pulse of the earth, you may begin to sense it, the vastness that lies below. Down there, the sunlight has never reached, yet the planet's slow heartbeat continues without pause, echoing softly through layers of ancient rock. It is a world hidden in darkness, but never in stillness. For as long as humans have walked the surface, they have wondered about what might exist beneath their feet. The ground we stand upon feels solid and secure, yet we know it is far from empty. The earth itself is alive with motion. Rivers of molten stone shift and cool. Crystals grow in slow patience. Water seeps through cracks, dissolving minerals as it journeys ever deeper. Even the smallest vibration on the surface can travel downward for miles, transformed into whispers of movement within the rock. It is as though the earth remembers every step ever taken upon it, each one absorbed into its eternal body. If you could descend gently through the soil, you would first pass through the thin, living layer where roots entwine and worms move silently through their tunnels. Here, light still touches life, and moisture carries the scent of growth. But with every meter downward, the air thins and the world darkens. The faint noises of the surface, the wind, the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of human life fade into stillness. The soil gives way to rock, and the rock to denser stone, until sound becomes a low vibration that you feel more than hear. The deeper you go, the slower everything seems to move, as though time itself grows heavy. Scientists tell us that the Earth's crust, the layer upon which all living things dwell, is only a fragile skin compared to the body beneath. It averages perhaps 30 kilometers in thickness, thinner than the peel of an apple compared to the fruit. Beneath it lies the mantle, a region of hot, slow-moving rock that stretches nearly 3,000 kilometers toward the core. It is there that immense heat stirs, like the slow breath of some ancient creature. The mantle moves, though we cannot see it, flowing so gradually that an inch in a year would be considered swift. Yet over millions of years, these motions lift mountains, open oceans, and reshape continents. Beneath the mantle lies the core, a sphere of iron and nickel as large as the moon. The outer core is molten and restless, its currents generating the planet's magnetic field. At its heart, the inner core is solid, compressed by pressures so immense that matter itself behaves like thought crystallized into metal. The temperature there exceeds the surface of the sun, yet it remains hidden, sealed away beneath thousands of kilometers of unbroken rock. We live upon this planet as though it were fixed and still, but deep below it is always moving, always whispering. Every tremor of an earthquake, every flicker of volcanic fire, every shift in the crust is a reminder that our world is not solid but alive. The mountains that seem eternal are merely ripples on its surface. The caves and caverns beneath us are the brief hollows between breaths. Yet despite all our instruments and theories, the subterranean world remains a mystery. The deepest hole ever drilled by human hands, the Kola super-deep borehole in Russia, reached just over 12 kilometers before heat and pressure halted the descent. Even there, at a depth that defies imagination, we had not yet touched the mantle. We remain creatures of the crust, gazing downward into a darkness we cannot enter. It is this unknown that has always stirred our imagination. In the quiet hours of history, people have dreamt of realms below the earth, worlds where ancient civilizations dwell in secret, where glowing rivers of crystal light, the darkness, and time flows differently. The whisper beneath our feet became the murmur of legends of hidden kingdoms, lost cities, and wise beings who withdrew into the depths when the surface grew harsh and bright. Such tales appear everywhere, from the mountains of Tibet to the deserts of North America, as though some memory older than language binds them together. To imagine life underground is to step into a world without sunlight, where warmth comes not from the sky but from the deep heart of the planet itself. It is a place where the walls breathe moisture, where the air carries the scent of minerals, and where silence feels alive. If one were to listen there, in perfect stillness, the earth might seem to hum softly, not in sound, but in vibration. The motion of magma far below, the slow cooling of rock, the faint tremor of tectonic drift all blending into a low, continuous tone. Some have said that this is the planet's voice, the music of its existence, though too slow and deep for human ears to truly perceive. The ancients felt this presence long before geology gave it a name. They carved their temples into cliffs and mountainsides, believing that stone was closer to the divine than air. In Greece, the oracle of Delphi spoke from a fissure in the earth, her visions rising with vapors from the deep. In Mesoamerica, caves were gateways to the world of ancestors. In nearly every culture, the ground was seen as a threshold, not merely soil and stone, but a boundary between worlds. The surface was the realm of light and growth, while below lay the domain of mystery and endurance, where things eternal slept. Even in our modern age, that intuition has never truly faded. We speak of being grounded, of returning to the earth, of roots and foundations. We bury our treasures, our memories, and our dead, trusting the planet to hold them in quiet care. The very act of digging carries symbolic weight. It is a descent into time, a search for what was lost or what has always been hidden. Imagine now, if you will, standing in a still cavern. The air is cool and carries a faint metallic scent. The walls glimmer with dampness, reflecting the soft shimmer of unseen crystals. Water drips steadily from above, counting moments in a rhythm older than any clock. Far away, a faint breeze sighs through unseen tunnels. You are surrounded by a silence so deep that your own heartbeat feels like an echo. In such a place, it is easy to believe that the earth itself is aware of you, that it watches, or perhaps remembers. If there were to exist an ancient civilization deep within this world, it would not be a place of bright cities or loud machinery. It would be something quieter, something that listens rather than speaks. Perhaps its people would live in harmony with the stone, their homes carved into chambers of mineral light. They would move through tunnels like flowing water, guided by sound and touch rather than sight. To them, the surface world might seem unbearably bright and swift, a place of noise and confusion compared to the calm rhythm of the depths. The whisper beneath our feet is not only the song of rock and pressure, but the echo of our own imagination. It calls to something within us that remembers darkness as comfort, the way the womb once held us in safety and warmth. To imagine the underworld is to dream of returning not to death, but to origin. The earth is our oldest home, and deep below its surface lies a stillness that mirrors the quiet we seek when we close our eyes at night. And so, as we begin this journey through thought and stone, let us move slowly. Let the noise of the surface fade behind us. Let the heartbeat of the planet guide our descent. For beneath every mountain and meadow, beneath every ocean and plain, there is a world that waits vast, unseen, and filled with the gentle murmur of eternity. 2. The layers of the living earth. Beneath the softness of soil and the stillness of stone lies a planet layered like a great, slow-beating heart. Each stratum of the earth holds its own temperament, its own rhythm, and its own ancient memory. To imagine it fully, one must think in deep time, not in days or centuries, but in the language of millions of years, where every inch of rock is a record of ages past. The earth, though silent to our the ordinary hearing, speaks continuously through these layers. It murmurs in heat, in pressure, and in the slow migration of minerals. When we speak of the earth as living, we do not speak in metaphor. Beneath the surface, the planet moves, breathes, and renews itself with a patience no creature can match. At the very top lies the crust, the delicate skin upon which all living things reside. Compared to the immensity of what lies below, it is impossibly thin, no thicker relative to the planet than a film of paint upon a vast sphere. Yet in this fragile layer, every forest, ocean, and city exists. Here, continents drift across molten foundations. Here mountains rise and fall. Here life clings to the narrow boundary between rock and air. The crust is divided into plates, immense slabs of solid rock that float upon the slower-moving mantle below. They collide, separate, and grind against one another, reshaping the surface in a slow but ceaseless dance. From the friction of their meeting come earthquakes and volcanoes, small reminders that the ground we stand upon is not as steady as it seems. If you could peel away the crust like the rind of an orange, you would find beneath it the upper mantle a realm of immense pressure and subdued motion. Though it may appear solid, the mantle flows, very slowly, like warm wax. Its movement drives the drift of continents, carrying entire worlds upon its back. Within this layer, rocks deform and reform, crystals dissolve, and new ones take their place. Elements mix and separate in an endless cycle of transformation. Here, time feels almost fluid. What takes a moment in the life of a human may take 1,000 centuries within this silent sea of stone. The mantle itself extends down nearly 3,000 kilometers, forming the thickest part of the planet's body. It is composed mostly of silicate minerals rich in magnesium and iron, giving it a dark, dense character. The heat that suffuses it is ancient, some of it left, over from the planet's violent birth, when gravity gathered dust and fire into a single world. Some of it arises from the decay of radioactive elements trapped within the rock, releasing energy slowly but persistently. This heat does not stay still. It rises in slow convection currents, carrying molten material upward while cooler rock sinks to take its place. This quiet, endless circulation has shaped every continent and ocean on Earth. If we were to continue downward, we would eventually reach the boundary where solid mantle meets molten metal, the outer core. Here the world transforms utterly. The rock softens into liquid, and the temperature surges to thousands of degrees. Iron and nickel flow like a luminous river, conducting electricity through their motion. This swirling metallic ocean gives rise to the magnetic field that encircles the planet, protecting it from the harshness of solar winds. Without that invisible shield, Earth's atmosphere might have been stripped away long ago, leaving a barren world like Mars. The magnetic field extends outward into space like unseen wings, turning our small planet into a sanctuary amid the silence of the cosmos. At the very center lies the inner core, a sphere of solid metal glowing with intense heat, compressed by pressures beyond imagining. Although it is hotter than the surface of the sun, the force bearing down upon it is so immense that the atoms cannot move freely. They are locked into a crystalline form, vibrating but unable to melt. The inner core is the Earth's true heart, the source of its magnetic pulse and its enduring warmth. Some scientists believe it rotates slightly faster than the surface, as though beating to its own slow rhythm. Each of these layers, crust, mantle, outer core and inner core, plays its part in maintaining the planet's balance. They are not separate worlds stacked upon one another, but a single system in motion. The heat from the core rises through the mantle, driving the drift of continents. The movement of continents shapes the oceans and the climate. The surface, in turn, cools the depths through rain and erosion, cycling water and minerals back into the interior. In this way, the planet behaves like a living organism, constantly renewing itself, circulating energy from within to without and back again. To imagine descending through these layers is to pass through stages of creation. In the crust, we find the familiar stone, soil, and the remains of living things turned to fossil and mineral. In the upper mantle, we encounter a different kind of life, one of elemental motion, where rock flows like syrup and heat glows from unseen chambers. Deeper still, in the outer core, matter itself begins to blur the boundaries between solid and liquid, between form and energy. And finally, at the center, everything becomes simple again. Pure metal, pure pressure, pure heat, the quiet heart of the planet, beating unseen. We know these layers not by sight, but by listening. Seismic waves, the echoes of earthquakes, travel through the Earth at different speeds depending on the materials they encounter. By measuring their journey, scientists can map the unseen interior, much as a physician might read the pulse of a body. It is humbling to think that every tremor, every small vibration that ripples through the crust, tells a story of the planet's inner structure. The Earth is not silent, it is simply speaking in a language of resonance and time. It is also easy to forget how interconnected these depths are with our own lives. The mantle's motion lifts mountains and opens valleys. The core's magnetic field shields our breathing air. The crust's restless plates create fertile lands through the ashes of volcanoes. Even the gentle minerals beneath our feet, the iron in our blood, the calcium in our bones once formed in the fires of the planet's interior. In a very real sense, we are made of the same material that glows at the center of the Earth. Every heartbeat we feel is an echo of the deeper pulse beneath. Sometimes, when one stands in a quiet valley or a vast cave, the illusion of stillness is almost perfect. Yet beneath that calm surface, the layers of the planet are shifting and sighing. Rock is melting in the depths, magma is rising unseen, and continents are gliding ever so slightly. The mountains are breathing. The ground beneath us is alive with slow energy. We do not feel it in the moment, but across the span of centuries, it becomes visible in the curvature of the land, in the folded strata of cliffs, in the pattern of rivers. The Earth writes its story slowly, but it never stops writing. To understand these layers is to sense the unity of all things, surface and depth, heat and cold, motion and rest. The planet is not divided into lifeless stone below and vibrant life above. Rather, life is the flowering of the same processes that churn within the mantle and burn at the core. We walk upon ancient matter that once flowed like fire and will one day return to that state again. The cycle is vast, but it is continuous. When you next feel the ground beneath your feet, try to imagine it as something more than soil and rock. Imagine it as a membrane, thin but powerful, separating the cool air from the molten depths. Imagine the heat rising from below, older than the sun, moving slowly upward until it reaches the surface as a faint warmth in your bones. The whisper of the Earth is not distant, it is within you. You carry its minerals, its structure, and its rhythm. The layers of the living Earth are not only beneath us, they are the layers of our own existence, written in the same elemental script. And so the descent continues from the crust, where life clings to light, into the dark embrace of the mantle, toward the slow glow of the core. Each layer holds its own mysteries, its own quiet strength. Together, they form the great body of the planet, ancient yet ever new. In the next moments of this journey, we will begin to explore how humanity, standing upon this immense foundation, first turned its thoughts downward, imagining the unseen worlds that might exist in the silence below. 3. Humanity's curiosity about the below. Since the dawn of awareness, humankind has gazed upward at the stars with wonder, yet an equal mystery has always lain beneath our feet. The Earth's depths, unseen and silent, have called to human imagination as surely as the sky has. Long before science offered maps of molten cores and tectonic plates, people sensed that the ground was not merely solid matter, but a living, breathing presence. To walk upon it was to walk upon memory itself. Every stone and cave was a doorway, every fault line a whisper from a hidden world. Curiosity about what lies below is as old as our species, a soft and persistent question echoing through the chambers of time. In the earliest days of human settlement, caves provided more than shelter. They were thresholds between light and darkness, between the known and the unknown. The flicker of a torch upon a stone wall revealed paintings of bison, horses, and handprints art that reached across tens of thousands of years. Archaeologists believe these ancient people chose caves not only for protection from weather, but for their deep, symbolic significance. To step into the earth was to step into a womb of origin, a place where the boundaries of life and death seem to blur. Even now, when one enters a great cavern, that feeling persists, a mix of reverence and unease, as though the stone itself holds breath. Across cultures, descent has always carried meaning. It is the movement toward origin, toward the place from which all life emerged, and to which it returns. The earliest myths echo this instinct. In Mesopotamia, the goddess Inanna descended to the underworld, passing through 7 gates to reach the realm of her sister Ereshkigal. Each gate required her to surrender something of herself until she stood naked before the powers of death. Her return to the surface marked not triumph over darkness, but transformation through it. The story told listeners that wisdom and renewal lie beneath, not only above. Similar tales rise from nearly every culture that has touched the earth with care. The Greeks spoke of Hades, not only as a god but as a realm, the invisible country where souls rested after death. The Norse imagined hell, a misty, cold underworld beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree. The ancient Egyptians built vast tombs and labyrinths leading downward, each designed to guide the soul through trials of the underworld toward rebirth. In the Mayan world, caves were the entrances to Xibalba, the place of fright, where gods tested human spirits through trials of darkness, fire, and illusion. To them, the earth was not a barrier but a passage to deeper truths. For the early Greeks, philosophers as well as poets pondered what the earth might hold. They believed that all elements, earth, water, air, and fire, moved in harmony, each seeking its natural place. Earth, being heaviest, belonged below, and so the realm of the dead was imagined to be its resting domain. Yet beneath this mythic vision lay an early intuition of geology. The philosopher Anaxagoras speculated that the interior of the earth contained vast reservoirs of fire and stone. Empedocles imagined that volcanic eruptions were the planet's way of exhaling. Even in myth, curiosity leaned gently toward understanding. The human desire to explore what lies below was not limited to imagination. Ancient miners and builders ventured deep into the ground long before modern tools existed. The underground cities of Cappadocia in modern Turkey are among the most striking examples. Labyrinthine networks of tunnels carved into soft volcanic rock, descending multiple levels. These cities, such as Derinkuyu, could house thousands of people, complete with stables, wells, and air shafts. They were shelters from danger, but also proof of humankind's trust in the earth as both protector and provider. To carve one's home into the planet itself was an act of faith. Throughout the Middle Ages, the idea of the earth's interior took on more mysterious and sometimes spiritual tones. Alchemists believed that gold grew within the earth as fruit grows upon a tree nourished by unseen forces. They described the planet as alive, its veins filled with metallic blood. Legends arose of hidden realms like Agartha or Shambhala, kingdoms of light and wisdom hidden beneath mountains. Travelers and mystics claimed that those who found their way to these subterranean lands would discover not darkness, but illumination. The idea of a benevolent world beneath our own reflected a yearning for purity and peace untouched by the surface's turmoil. With the dawn of the scientific age, curiosity about the below began to shift from mystical to physical inquiry. In the 17th century, natural philosophers tried to calculate the density of the Earth, speculating whether it might be hollow. In 1692, the astronomer Edmund Halley proposed that our planet consisted of concentric shells, each with its own atmosphere, and perhaps even its own life. Though his theory was eventually disproven, it captured the imagination of generations. Writers and explorers dreamed of vast inner worlds lit by central suns, civilizations evolving in isolation beneath the crust. The hollow earth became a stage for both fantasy and metaphor, a reflection of the human wish to believe that no frontier is truly closed. As exploration advanced, the earth revealed itself to be less hollow but no less alive. Miners delved deeper, unearthing fossils of creatures that had lived long before humankind. Each discovery was another whisper from the depths, another reminder that the past sleeps beneath us. In the 19th century, geologists began to read the planet's layers like pages in a vast, slow-written book. The idea that the Earth itself held history, recorded not in ink but in stone, transformed curiosity into science. Yet even then, the old myths never entirely disappeared. Writers like Jules Verne merged the language of discovery with that of wonder, imagining journeys to the centre of the Earth where prehistoric life still flourished in luminous caverns. In every age, curiosity about the below has been both scientific and spiritual. To dig is to seek knowledge, but also to seek meaning. Archaeologists uncover the buried homes of our ancestors, geologists uncover the story of mountains, and paleontologists uncover the long silent bones of vanished species. Each descent into the earth mirrors a descent into ourselves, a quiet return to origin. The darkness below becomes not a place of fear, but of understanding. What draws us downward, perhaps, is the desire for continuity. The surface world changes endlessly. Civilizations rise and fall, rivers alter their paths, but the underground endures. It is patient. It holds the shapes of vanished oceans, the impressions of leaves that fell hundreds of millions of years ago, the footprints of creatures whose names we will never know. To step into the earth is to step into memory itself, and so our curiosity persists. Even now we send machines and sensors deep into the crust, measuring the slow tremors that ripple through it. We drill into the seafloor, extracting cores that reveal climates of ages past. Each discovery deepens the mystery rather than ends it. The deeper we go, the more we realize how little we know. Perhaps that is the essence of our fascination with the below. It humbles us. The earth reminds us that our existence rests upon something ancient, vast, and largely unseen. Beneath every city and forest lies a world untouched by sunlight, moving to its own rhythm. The heat that rises through the rocks is the same warmth that shaped the continents and stirred the first oceans. In feeling awe for what lies beneath, we acknowledge our place within something greater, a story still unfolding beneath the slow breath of the planet. To wonder about the depths is to listen for that story, to hear the echo of our origins and the murmur of time. From the first cave painters to the scientists of today, humanity has never ceased to lean toward the darkness below, not out of fear but out of longing. For in that darkness, we sense the continuity of life and the unbroken heartbeat of the world itself. 4. Myths of the inner realms. For as long as stories have been spoken by firelight, humankind has woven tales about what lies beneath the ground. The idea of hidden realms below the surface, vast, echoing worlds untouched by sunlight, has appeared in every corner of the planet, carried by cultures separated by oceans and centuries. These myths of the inner realms reveal not only curiosity about the Earth's depths, but also something profound about human nature. They mirror our understanding of life and death, of descent and renewal, and of the fragile boundary between the known and the unseen. Beneath their symbolic surface lies a universal truth, that the darkness below is not merely a void but a place of transformation. In ancient Greece, the underworld was known as Hades, both a place and a god. It was not conceived as a realm of torment, but as a quiet continuation of existence. Souls of the dead descended through shadowed caverns, ferried across the river Styx by Charon, the sombre boatman. On the far shore stood the gates of eternity, guarded by Cerberus, the three-headed hound whose duty was to prevent the living from entering and the dead from returning. Beyond those gates lay a landscape of twilight meadows, valleys, and rivers that mirrored the surface world but felt suspended in time. The ancient Greeks saw the underworld not as punishment but as balance, a reflection of life stripped of its brightness, where every soul found rest in, with accordance with its deeds. This theme of balance and passage can be traced far beyond Greece. In Mesopotamia, one of the earliest civilizations to leave written myths, the land of the dead was called Kur. It was described as a shadowy domain beneath the mountains, ruled by Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld. The story of Inanna's descent to visit her sister is among the oldest surviving tales of spiritual transformation. As she passed through each of the 7 gates of Kur, She was stripped of her garments, her jewels, and finally her crown symbols of her worldly power. When she arrived before Ereshkigal, she stood bare and humbled, a mortal among spirits. Her eventual return to the surface marked her rebirth, a reminder that to descend is also to be renewed. In Egypt, the inner realm was seen not as a single place but as a journey. The dead travelled through the Duat, a vast underworld illuminated by the nightly voyage of the sun god Ra. Each night, Ra descended into the earth, sailing upon a celestial river through 12 gates corresponding to the hours of darkness. Along his passage he faced serpents, guardians, and spirits, but he was aided by the souls of the righteous. When he reached the eastern horizon at dawn, he emerged reborn, bringing light to the world once more. This cycle of descent and ascent reflected the eternal rhythm of life, death, and rebirth, the very pulse of existence itself. The Egyptians carved these beliefs into stone, inscribing tomb walls with maps of the underworld so that the deceased could follow the same path toward renewal. Far to the north, the Norse imagined the underworld as Helheim, a misty and quiet place beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree. Hel, the goddess who ruled there, was not a demon but a somber guardian, half beautiful and half decayed, embodying the duality of existence. For the Norse, the afterlife was not solely about glory or despair, it was about destiny. The warriors who died in battle went to Valhalla, but the countless others who perished in ordinary ways journeyed to Helheim. There they awaited the world's end, when even the gods would descend into the same darkness. The Norse accepted that beneath the brilliance of the heavens lay an inevitable return to the earth, a quiet acknowledgement that even gods must one day rest beneath their own roots. In the high mountains of Tibet and the plateaus of Central Asia, another myth took root, the legend of Shambhala. Though often imagined as a hidden kingdom within the earth, it was said to exist in a realm both physical and spiritual, a place of peace, wisdom, and perfect harmony. Shambhala was not an underworld of the dead, but an inner world of enlightenment, concealed beneath snow and stone. Those who found it would discover not shadow but light. The tale suggests a reversal of the usual pattern, that the earth's interior might harbour not ghosts or darkness but serenity itself. For centuries, monks and travellers sought this hidden paradise, believing it to be a place where spirit and matter were in balance, where the pulse of the planet resonated with the calm of awakened minds. Among the indigenous peoples of North America, stories of the inner realms often speak not of the dead but of beginnings. The Hopi tell that the first people emerged from the womb of the earth through a small opening called the Sipapu. Before that emergence, humankind lived underground, protected by the ant people during times of catastrophe on the surface. These beings, wise and gentle, taught early humans how to survive, how to store food, and how to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. When the time came, the Hopi ascended to the world above, carrying with them the memory of their subterranean guardians. To this day, the Sipapu remains sacred, a reminder that life began below before it learned to walk in the light. In the myths of Mesoamerica, particularly among the Maya, the underworld was known as Xibalba, the place of fright. It was ruled by the lords of death, who tested the souls of mortals through trials of darkness and illusion. Yet even here, the descent into the earth was not purely a fall into terror. In the Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Maya, the hero twins voluntarily journeyed into Xibalba, confronting death itself in a series of challenges. Through wit and courage they overcame every trial, eventually transforming into the sun and the moon. Their descent became the foundation of the cosmic cycle, day following night, life following death. Across the Pacific, in the traditions of Polynesia, the Earth's interior was also seen as the home of the spirits. The Maori of New Zealand told of Rarohenga, the underworld, where the ancestors dwelled in peace. It was a realm of learning and remembrance, not of punishment. The living could communicate with it through rituals, dreams, and songs, seeking guidance from those who came before. The idea that knowledge and wisdom resided beneath the earth rather than above it suggests that descent was not feared but respected, a movement toward deeper understanding. In nearly every culture, the underworld holds dual meanings. It is both a place of endings and of beginnings, of decay and of rebirth. The ancients recognized that the soil itself transforms death into new life. From fallen leaves and buried bodies rise new roots and green shoots. To descend into the earth was, in a sense, to return to the source of all growth. This understanding was expressed in ritual and story, in burials aligned with the stars, in tombs shaped like passageways, and in prayers whispered to the ground. Even now we bury our dead with care, trusting that the earth will receive them gently. Modern minds may no longer picture a literal Hades or Xibalba, but the symbolism endures. The journey downward still represents introspection, discovery, and renewal. In psychology, we speak of exploring the unconscious, the inner landscape, of the mind, as though it were a descent into caverns of thought. We confront what lies hidden, we surrender illusions, and we return changed. These are the same stages that myth described millennia ago, rendered not in stone but in memory. Perhaps this is why myths of the inner realms continue to captivate us. They remind us that the darkness beneath is not our enemy but our teacher. The underworld, whether imagined as shadowed halls or radiant kingdoms, reflects the deep truth that growth requires descent. The seed must sink into the soil before it can sprout. The night must fall before the dawn. And so, as we imagine an ancient civilization dwelling deep within the earth, we are drawing upon these same old instincts. The notion that wisdom, endurance, or even gentleness might flourish in the dark feels deeply familiar. It is the echo of every story ever told about what lies below a whisper, that perhaps the heart of the planet and the heart of humanity are not so different after all. 5. Legends of hidden peoples. Throughout human history, whispers of unseen civilizations have drifted through the imagination of every culture. While the stars above inspired myths of gods and celestial travelers, the ground beneath invited stories of beings who chose a quieter existence, hidden from the brightness of the surface. These were the hidden peoples, ancient, enduring, and often wiser than humankind, whose worlds were said to lie beneath mountains, deserts, or even the very soil beneath our feet. In these legends, they were guardians of forgotten knowledge, protectors of the planet's inner balance, and silent witnesses to the rise and fall of those who lived in the light. Many of the most enduring tales of subterranean beings begin with the idea of refuge. The earth, in these stories, offers sanctuary to those who have withdrawn from the chaos of the surface. Among the Hopi people of North America, there is a quiet reverence for the ant people, beings said to have lived underground and sheltered humanity during times of destruction. When fire and flood swept the surface, the ant people opened their tunnels to the Hopi ancestors, teaching them how to survive on seeds and roots stored in the darkness. The Hopi described these beings not as insects, but as spiritual guardians, diligent, humble, and patient. Their image serves as a reminder that cooperation and compassion, even in times of fear, are the virtues that ensure endurance. Far from the deserts of the southwest, in the misted lands of northern Europe, legends of hidden folk took on another form. The Norse spoke of the Dukkalfar, the dark elves who lived deep within the earth, crafting metals and gems of extraordinary beauty. Unlike their light-dwelling kin, these beings avoided the sun, preferring the soft glow of magma and mineral veins. In later folklore, they evolved into the dwarves' sturdy craftsmen who forged the gods' weapons and jewelry. They lived in halls carved from stone, illuminated by molten gold and the shimmer of precious ores. Their stories carried the sound of hammer on anvil, echoing through the rock as a heartbeat of creation. To the people who mined the northern mountains, the notion that unseen artisans worked alongside them beneath the ground brought a quiet sense of companionship, as though the earth itself had partners in its eternal labour. Across the sea, the Celts told of the Sidhe, an ancient race who retreated beneath the hills when humankind began to spread across the land. The Sidhe were said to dwell in hollow mounds, known as the Fairy Hills, where music and laughter could sometimes be heard on quiet nights. They were not entirely separate from the living. The boundaries between their world and ours were thin. To the Irish, these beings were neither gods nor ghosts, but remnants of an older world, one that had gracefully withdrawn. It was said that if you stepped into their realm, time would lose meaning a single night. Among the Sidhe, might last a century. These stories reflected an enduring human belief that something sacred and ancient remains just out of sight, continuing its slow, eternal existence beneath the ground we tread daily. In the Himalayas and across Central Asia, legends took a more mystical turn. Here, monks and travellers spoke of Agartha, a vast and radiant kingdom hidden within the earth, connected to the surface by secret tunnels beneath mountains and deserts. The people of Agartha were said to be spiritually advanced, their society founded on harmony and wisdom. Some stories described a central city, Shambhala, glowing with inner light, a realm untouched by war or greed. It was said that only the pure of heart could find the paths that lead there. To seekers of enlightenment, Agartha represented the inner journey as much as the physical one. It was a metaphor for self-discovery, a reminder that illumination often lies hidden within, beneath the layers of fear and noise that make up the outer world. In Russia, Siberian travelers told of the Chud, a mysterious people who once lived on the surface but vanished beneath the earth to escape invading forces. They were believed to have sealed their tunnels behind them, carrying their treasures and crafts into the deep. From time to time it was said that faint music could be heard rising from the ground, songs of the Chud continuing their lives far below, unbroken by centuries. These stories persisted well into modern times, blurring the line between myth and folklore. They express something deeply human, a longing for continuity, for a people who might endure unchanging in a world that constantly shifts. Among the peoples of the Andes, another legend speaks softly of those who vanished below. The Inca, whose empire stretched across the high mountains of South America, believed their ancestors emerged from the depths of the earth through a sacred cave called Pacaritambo. Some chroniclers wrote that the Inca believed the first humans had lived underground for ages before ascending to populate the surface. Even the great city of Cuzco, heart of the empire, was said to rest upon a network of tunnels leading into the mountains, guarded by stone and secrecy. These passages, whether literal or symbolic, reflected a worldview in which the earth was not a mere foundation, but a living ancestor, both womb and tomb, a being that birthed and sheltered civilizations. In later centuries, as explorers and storytellers carried these myths across continents, new variations emerged. 19th century travelers returning from Tibet, Mongolia, and India spoke of hearing rumors of vast subterranean cities connected by tunnels stretching thousands of miles. Writers such as Sandiv Dalvedre and Ferdinand Ossendowski described Agartha as a real civilization, a hidden sanctuary guiding humanity's spiritual evolution from beneath the surface. Their accounts blurred the boundary between mysticism and imagination, transforming myth into speculative philosophy. To readers weary of industrialization and conflict, the notion of an enlightened society hidden beneath the chaos of the world above offered both comfort and hope. Even modern tales echo these older traditions. In the early 20th century, Arctic explorers and novelists began to speculate about openings at the poles leading into the Earth's interior. Though rooted more in science fiction than spirituality, such stories carried the same quiet wonder, the belief that life might exist beyond what we can see, sustained by warmth and secrecy. From these tales grew the idea of ancient subterranean civilizations that predate humankind itself. The Lemurians beneath Mount Shasta, the hidden guardians beneath the Gobi Desert, the wise ones who observed the surface world in silence. Each variation reflects a longing for guidance, for continuity, for beings who have mastered peace while we still struggle toward it. In many ways, the legends of hidden peoples serve as mirrors for our deepest emotions. They speak to the fear of loss and extinction, and to the hope that something of us might endure. The earth, with its vast and inaccessible depths, provides the perfect stage for this yearning. To imagine a civilization thriving in eternal twilight is to imagine that wisdom survives, even when forgotten, that the planet itself remembers what we have lost. These stories also express our respect for the unknown. We sense instinctively that beneath our world lies a greater one, ancient and immense, and that perhaps it is best left undisturbed. Yet there is tenderness in these tales as well. The beings who live below are often portrayed not as conquerors or monsters, but as caretakers. They understand the language of stone and water. They live in harmony with the slow pulse of the planet. In the Hopi tradition, the ant people teach generosity. In the Norse sagas, the dwarves teach craftsmanship. In Celtic lore, the Sidi teach the beauty of retreat. Across all these myths, the hidden peoples remind us of the wisdom of stillness, of the power that lies in withdrawing, listening, and living in quiet balance with the world. When one considers these stories together, they begin to sound like chapters of a single ancient memory. Each culture, in its own way, has imagined that beneath the ground there exists a second world, older, quieter, and more enduring than the one above. Whether that world is real or symbolic hardly matters. What matters is the feeling it evokes. The sense that the earth is not a dead mass but a sanctuary, that within its depths, life in some form continues to thrive in silence. As the surface world grows ever louder and more restless, these legends of hidden peoples feel like gentle reminders. They tell us that wisdom does not always dwell in the light, and that sometimes the truest civilizations are the ones that choose to live unseen, in harmony with the heartbeat of the planet. Somewhere in that deep, endless quiet, we imagine that they still exist, crafting, singing, remembering guardians of an ancient peace that the world above has long forgotten. 6. Descent into the real Earth. To imagine the descent into the real Earth is to picture a journey not only downward through layers of stone, but inward toward the quiet heart of the planet itself. For most of human history, the depths of the Earth have existed more as an idea than a place one could truly visit. The world beneath our feet was the realm of imagination, of myth and mystery, populated by unseen forces or forgotten peoples. Yet in the past few centuries, humankind has begun to pierce the crust in search of understanding. With machines, drills, and courage, we have traced the first, tentative paths into the body of the planet, revealing a landscape far stranger and more delicate than any legend. The descent has been slow, and even the deepest shafts are only scratches upon the surface of a vast and ancient being. Still, each meter downward brings us closer to understanding that the Earth's interior is not a dead void, but a living system, humming quietly with its own energy. The journey begins in the thin, sunlit crust where all life resides. This is the realm of soil and sediment, of roots that twist through sand and clay in search of nourishment. As one moves below the surface, the signs of life grow sparser but never entirely vanish. In deep caves, microorganisms cling to mineral walls, feeding on sulfur or iron. They live without sunlight, drawing energy from the chemistry of stone itself. Some of these microbes may have changed little in hundreds of millions of years, remnants of an ancient biosphere that existed before complex plants and animals. In this twilight zone of life, darkness is not a barrier but a constant companion. The air is cool, often moist, and carries the slow, echoing drip of water travelling through the rock, a sound that could be mistaken for the earth breathing in its sleep. Human beings have always been drawn to caves, perhaps because they feel like the Earth's own heartbeat made tangible. Caves such as Lascaux in France or Altamira in Spain bear the earliest known art of our species, painted tens of thousands of years ago. The artists who crawled through narrow passages by flickering torchlight must have felt both fear and wonder, surrounded by the weight of stone pressing in from every side. In the silence, they painted animals with astonishing grace: bison, horses, deer figures that seemed to move in the wavering glow. These paintings were more than art. They were conversations with the earth, gestures of reverence toward the mystery of the below. Even then, long before geology gave names to layers of stone, humans sensed that to descend was to enter the memory of the world. In later ages, descent became a tool for survival and discovery. Miners learned to follow the veins of ore that laced through mountains, carving tunnels that reached hundreds of meters below ground. The deeper they dug, the more they realized how alien the underworld could be. Temperatures rose, the air thickened, the stone groaned faintly with the weight of the world above. In some mines, the air shimmered with invisible heat, carrying the metallic scent of the elements themselves. The walls were streaked with colors that had never known daylight, greens of copper, deep reds of iron, and veins of quartz glinting like frozen lightning. These depths demanded respect. A single collapse could seal a tunnel forever. Yet even in danger, miners found awe. They spoke of strange lights flickering in the darkness, of sounds like whispering wind. Whether born of fatigue, superstition, or the subtle shifting of the rock, such experiences deepened the sense that the earth was not inert but aware. In the modern age, technology has extended our descent far beyond the reach of pick and torch. The deepest hole ever drilled by human hands is the Kola super-deep borehole in the far north of Russia. Begun in 1970, it was an ambitious attempt to reach through the crust and study the Earth's interior directly. Engineers drilled for nearly 20 years, reaching a depth of about 12 kilometers so deep that temperatures exceeded 180 degrees Celsius. At that point, the rock behaved less like solid stone and more like plastic, slowly flowing and closing around the drill bit. The project was halted, not because of failure, but because the conditions of the deep earth proved too extreme for human technology. Even so, the data gathered there transformed our understanding of the planet. Scientists discovered microscopic fossils in the rock, the remains of single-celled organisms that had lived in ancient oceans billions of years ago, now entombed far below the modern surface. The borehole, though sealed long ago, stands as a quiet monument to human curiosity and humility. It reminds us that even our greatest efforts have barely touched the skin of the world. Elsewhere, the descent continues in other forms. Deep mines, like the Mponeng gold mine in South Africa, reach depths of nearly 4 kilometers. At those depths, the rock temperature can exceed 50 degrees Celsius, and the air must be cooled to make survival possible. The miners who work there move through tunnels where daylight is a memory, their lamps casting small halos against black stone. Scientists studying these mines have found ecosystems of bacteria living kilometers below the surface, sealed away from the world above. These microorganisms feed on chemical reactions generated by the breakdown of radioactive minerals, proving that life can exist independently of sunlight. Such discoveries suggest that the boundary between geology and biology is thinner than we once believed. The Earth is alive not only at its surface but deep within its bones. Beyond the mines and boreholes lies a different kind of descent, one of exploration rather than extraction. Cave divers and speleologists venture into the planet's natural passageways, where underground rivers carve labyrinths through limestone. The Krubera Cave in Georgia, one of the deepest known, plunges more than 2 kilometers into the Earth. In such places, the descent is both physical and psychological. The light from the surface fades completely, and the air grows still. The sense of time begins to change. Minutes stretch into hours, and sound travels in strange ways. The explorers who go there often describe the experience as dreamlike, a suspension between the familiar and the unknown. To descend into the real Earth is to surrender to its tempo, a rhythm measured not in seconds, but in the slow drip of water, the settling of dust, and the gentle shifting of stone. Even with all our technology, the Earth guards its secrets. The average thickness of the crust beneath continents is around 35 kilometers, yet we have reached no deeper than 1/3 of that. Beneath the oceans, the crust is thinner, but the crushing pressure of the water above makes direct access nearly impossible. The mantle beneath remains largely unseen, known only through the vibrations of earthquakes that ripple through it. In truth, we live upon a world whose interior remains a mystery greater than the stars. We have sent probes to the edges of the solar system, but we have never seen our own planet's heart. And yet, every attempt to reach it, every cave explored and every core sample retrieved, brings with it a quiet revelation. The deeper we go, the more we realize that the planet is not separate from us. Its warmth sustains us, its minerals form our bodies, its gravity holds us close like a patient guardian. The descent into the real Earth becomes an act of reverence, a way of acknowledging the vastness beneath the surface, the silent foundation upon which all life depends. If one could continue to travel downward beyond the reach of drills and light, one would enter realms of unimaginable heat and pressure. Rock would become fluid, metal would flow like water, and sound itself would slow into vibration too deep to hear. In such a place, the idea of time would lose meaning. Perhaps this is why, even as we explore the physical Earth, we continue to dream of hidden civilizations within it. Our myths of the inner world are expressions of awe before the planet's unfathomable depth. The reality of the Earth's interior, though devoid of cities or crystal domes, is no less wondrous. It is the great mystery that sustains all life, a furnace of creation burning silently below, shaping the continents above with its slow, patient breath. To descend into the real Earth, then, is not merely a physical act but a spiritual one. It is a reminder that we stand upon an ancient living system, layered with history and movement. The further we go down, the closer we come to understanding the profound stillness that underlies all motion, the deep pulse that has never ceased since the planet was born. Every step into the dark is a return to origin, the journey into the place where life itself began, and where, in some distant future, it may return once more. 7. Pressure, darkness, and time. To imagine the world beneath the crust is to imagine an environment shaped not by sunlight or wind, but by weight. Down there, the air is not an element of freedom. It is a presence that grows heavy with depth until even the rock begins to behave like a slow liquid. Pressure, darkness, and time rule that hidden world. They are not forces one can see, but they sculpt every particle of stone, every mineral vein, every fragment of heat that escapes upward. Together, they form the quiet trinity of the deep earth, a realm of slow change where nothing is still, yet nothing seems to move. Pressure is the first companion of descent. On the surface, we live beneath a single atmosphere of weight, the gentle burden of the air pressing down upon every square inch of skin. But each step downward multiplies that weight. In a few hundred meters, the air grows dense enough to squeeze the breath from the lungs. In a kilometer, the pressure of the overlying rock surpasses any force found naturally at the surface. Deep within mines, one can feel it in the bones, a soft, persistent ache that seems to pulse in rhythm with the earth itself. Rock that appears unyielding becomes subtly plastic, bending under the colossal weight of everything above it. What feels eternal is, in truth, always flowing, reshaping itself to balance the load. The deeper one goes, the more the familiar laws of surface life begin to lose their meaning. Heat accumulates, not from sunlight, but from the slow decay of ancient elements buried within the planet since its birth. Each kilometer downward adds about 20 to 30 degrees Celsius, and soon the temperature surpasses anything found naturally on the surface. Water trapped in the pores of rock is heated until it becomes supercritical, neither liquid nor vapor but something between. At these depths, chemistry becomes blurred. Substances exist in states our eyes were never meant to see. This is the true inner weather of the planet, where rock melts, flows and freezes in patterns that unfold over millions of years. Darkness reigns absolute in this world. Even the faintest hint of light from the surface is lost within a few meters of solid ground. What remains is a kind of eternal night, not hostile, but complete. Human senses, tuned to the rhythm of sunrise and sunset, struggle in such conditions. In the absence of light, time itself begins to dissolve. There are no shadows to measure change, no stars to mark direction. For living creatures that venture there, this is both challenge and peace, the surrender to a timeless rhythm that belongs solely to the earth. In such perfect dark, the mind becomes quiet, the body attuned to subtler signals, the distant groan of stone, the soft vibration of shifting pressure, the gentle movement of unseen water through cracks. Time in the depths flows differently. The pace of geological transformation is so slow that, from a human perspective, it appears motionless. Yet the rocks are never truly at rest. Under immense pressure, minerals slowly realign their crystals, forming patterns that mirror the strain of the ages. Fossils once trapped in the crust are flattened into delicate imprints, their details preserved not despite the crushing weight but because of it. Even mountains, those symbols of permanence, are the result of pressure, acting patiently over eons, crustal plates colliding, folding, and lifting stone that once lay far below. Every mountain peak is, in essence, an ancient seabed, reborn by the invisible hand of the deep. If one could accelerate the flow of time, watching the Earth in the span of millions of years compressed into a single heartbeat, the planet would seem to breathe. Continents would drift like leaves upon a molten tide. Mountains would rise like slow waves, erode and sink again beneath the oceans. Caverns would open and collapse, magma would surge and cool, and the crust itself would ripple in long, sighing motions. What we call solid ground is only an illusion of stillness, a temporary resting place in an unending cycle of renewal. Pressure drives this cycle, shaping the planet as surely as the pulse of a heart shapes the flow of blood. Within this realm of weight and dark, life takes forms almost unimaginable. Deep below the surface, bacteria thrive in isolation, sealed away from sunlight for millions of years. Some of them feed on hydrogen produced by the interaction of water and rock. Others draw energy from radiation, transforming decay into sustenance. Their metabolism is glacially slow, some divide only once every few centuries. Yet they persist, a living testimony to the resilience of existence. To them, pressure and darkness are not obstacles but the natural condition of being. They live in a state that mirrors the planet itself, patient, enduring, and quiet. Human beings who have ventured into the deepest tunnels describe sensations unlike any other. The sense of being enveloped by the earth, of hearing one's own heartbeat echoed through stone. The air becomes thick, almost fluid. The silence presses inward until even the act of breathing feels reverent. There is a strange comfort in it too. The deeper one goes, the more the clamour of the surface world fades away. The concept of time, of urgency, begins to lose its grip. The body adjusts to the rhythm of dripping water and the slow settling of dust. In such an environment, the mind begins to understand something of the planet's own patience. Pressure and darkness also transform matter in ways that shape the surface far above. Under the immense weight of overlying rock, carbon atoms rearrange themselves into diamonds and crystals of perfect symmetry, formed not by chance but by the steady insistence of time. Deep within the mantle, rocks melt and mix, creating plumes of magma that will one day break through as volcanoes, replenishing the surface with minerals and heat. What appears as sudden eruption is, in truth, the result of millions of years of quiet accumulation. The surface and the depths are bound together in this endless exchange, one exhaling as the other inhales. In the human imagination, darkness is often feared, and pressure is seen as threat. Yet beneath the surface, these forces are the architects of stability. The weight of the overlying layers keeps the Earth's interior from expanding violently. The darkness protects delicate ecosystems from the chaos of sunlight. Even time, slow and inexorable, acts as a kind of caretaker, smoothing the fractures of creation and erasing the scars of upheaval. What we call destruction is often only transformation stretched across an interval too vast for us to comprehend. To sit quietly in thought of these depths is to recognize how different their language is from ours. Theirs is a language of persistence, not of haste. A single movement may take longer than the span of all recorded history. A shift of a few centimeters may alter the shape of continents. Each grain of mineral carries the story of pressure and temperature it has endured, etched invisibly into its structure. If we could read those patterns fully, we might understand not only the history of the planet but the meaning of endurance itself. Perhaps that is what draws us so deeply to the idea of the underground. Not only the mystery of what lies there, but the reminder of slowness in a world that rushes toward its own noise. In the depths, change is inevitable but never hurried. Darkness, so absolute, becomes not emptiness but rest. Pressure, so immense, becomes not oppression but stability. And time, so vast, becomes not distance but continuity. Together they form the quiet equilibrium upon which the fragile brightness of the surface depends. If one listens closely enough, even from the world above, there are moments when the earth seems to sigh, the faint shudder of an earthquake far away, the tremor of magma moving unseen, the gentle hum of resonance that instruments can detect but human ears cannot. These are the voices of pressure, darkness, and time speaking in unison. They are reminders that we live not upon a dead rock but within a living system whose heartbeat continues whether we notice it or not. To descend into such a world is to step beyond ordinary perception, into a realm where patience is creation and silence is full of meaning. The pressure sustains the shape of the planet, the darkness shelters its secret life, and time, vast, indifferent, yet kind, ensures that nothing is ever truly lost. Everything becomes something else, again and again, beneath the unbroken continuity of stone. In this way, the deep earth mirrors the deepest parts of ourselves. Beneath the surface of thought and emotion lie the same forces: weight, shadow, duration. They mold us slowly, unseen, yet with lasting effect. The wisdom of the underground, if it can be said to exist, is simply this: that life, to endure, must sometimes grow inward, away from light and sound, into the slow, sustaining pulse of the unseen world. 8. The hidden biology of the deep beneath, the crust of the earth, in the silent pressure and the perfect darkness, life endures in forms both delicate and ancient. For most of human history, we believe that nothing could live so far from sunlight, for light, after all, is the engine of all growth upon the surface. Yet in the last few decades, science has revealed a truth more astonishing than myth. The earth is alive even in its depths. Far below the reach of roots, beneath the cold layers of stone, there exists a hidden biosphere, a world of organisms that breathe without air, feed without sunlight, and live on timescales so slow that their days might outlast civilizations. This hidden life reminds us that existence does not belong solely to the light. It belongs also to the quiet patience of the dark. The first clues of this unseen world came not from the imagination, but from the minds. When scientists began studying the rock walls of the deepest tunnels, they discovered that they were not barren. Thin films of bacteria and archaea clung to the surfaces, feeding on the minerals within the stone itself. These organisms were found kilometers below the surface, in places where no sunlight had ever reached and where oxygen was scarce or absent. Their survival depended on the chemistry of the rock they drew. Energy from reactions between water and minerals, extracting hydrogen and sulfur to power their tiny, resilient lives. In such places, life is not driven by photosynthesis, but by chemosynthesis, the quiet conversion of inorganic elements into the energy of being. In the Mponeng gold mine of South Africa, more than 3 kilometers below the surface, researchers discovered one of the most isolated ecosystems on Earth. Within microscopic cracks in the rock lived a single species of bacterium called Desulforudis audaxviator, its name meaning the bold traveller of sulfur. This organism existed entirely on its own, without connection to any larger ecosystem. It fed on hydrogen produced by the decay of radioactive minerals and used sulfate as an energy source. It required no sunlight, no plants, no other living partner. Its world was a pocket of warm rock and mineral water sealed off for millions of years, yet it thrived. In that discovery lay something profound. Life does not need the sky to exist. It can flourish in the slow warmth of the planet's own heart. Such revelations reshaped our understanding of what life truly is. The deep biosphere, the layer of life buried within the crust, is now believed to be immense. Some estimates suggest that the total mass of these subterranean microorganisms may rival or even exceed all life on the surface. They live in sediments kilometers beneath the oceans, in pores of continental rock, and in aquifers locked beneath mountains. Some survive at temperatures above 100 degrees Celsius, where water behaves more like steam than liquid. Others endure at pressures so great that a human body would be crushed instantly. Yet these organisms do not merely tolerate such extremes. They have evolved to depend on them. Their enzymes, their very structures, are shaped for heat and density. They are the quiet heirs of a world that never saw the sunday. The existence of this deep life suggests that Earth's biosphere is not confined to the fragile ribbon of air and ocean that encircles the planet. Instead, it extends downward, perhaps as deep as 10 kilometers, blending gradually with the geologic processes of the mantle. Life and stone are not separate. They interpenetrate. In this hidden symbiosis, living cells influence the chemistry of the rock around them, dissolving minerals, creating traces of methane or hydrogen, and even altering the way the crust conducts heat. The deep biosphere is not only alive, it participates in the metabolism of the entire planet. It is as if the Earth itself breathes slowly through these microscopic lungs, exchanging energy between its surface and its depths. In caves closer to the surface, other forms of hidden life thrive. There are blind fish that navigate by sensing vibrations in the water, their eyes reduced to pale shadows beneath translucent skin. There are insects that have never seen the sun, their bodies delicate and pale, feeding on the fine dust of organic matter that drifts down from above. Fungi thread their way across damp stone, drawing nutrients from minerals and decaying material. Even the simplest droplet of water that seeps through limestone can carry an entire community of microorganisms, a drifting, invisible caravan sustained by patience and persistence. These life forms are not fragile intrusions. They are perfectly adapted to stillness. Their energy flows so slowly that generations might pass before a colony changes shape. In the depths, time becomes an ally rather than an adversary. Some scientists believe that life on Earth may have begun in places much like these in the mineral-rich darkness, where heat and water met within the planet's crust. Hydrothermal vents at the ocean floor, where superheated water seeps through volcanic rock, harbour dense communities of organisms even today. Tube worms, clams, and bacteria flourish in those places, feeding on chemicals released from the Earth's interior. These ecosystems are entirely independent of sunlight, relying instead on the energy of the planet itself. It is easy to imagine that early life emerged in a similar setting, deep within the protective warmth of stone, long before the atmosphere or oceans were ready to sustain it. If that is true, then the hidden life we find in modern depths is not exotic or exceptional, it is ancestral. It is a living memory of the beginning. Even more remarkable is the resilience of these subterranean communities. Some microbes have been found dormant in salt crystals or sediment layers for tens of millions of years, reawakening when exposed to moisture. Their metabolism slows nearly to nothing, allowing them to wait out geological epochs as if they were single moments of sleep. Others exist in a kind of perpetual stasis, their cells dividing so rarely that, from a human perspective, they appear immortal. This endurance redefines what it means to live. In the deep earth, existence is not measured in beating hearts or flickering seasons. It is measured in persistence, the ability to simply continue. When one reflects on the vastness of this hidden biosphere, a gentle truth emerges. Life does not conquer the earth, it harmonizes with it. The bacteria beneath the crust do not reshape the planet to their will. They inhabit its quiet spaces, filling the cracks between grains of stone, turning even the smallest void into a home. In this way, they mirror the principle of all enduring things that survival lies in adaptation, in listening rather than forcing, in flowing with the world's rhythm rather than opposing it. The discovery of life in such impossible places has also changed the way we look beyond our planet. If organisms can live kilometers beneath rock, feeding on minerals and radiation, then the same could be true elsewhere on Mars, beneath its frozen soil, on the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, where oceans may lie hidden beneath crusts of ice. The Earth's deep biosphere may be the key that unlocks our understanding of life in the cosmos. What we find within our own planet becomes a quiet reflection of what might exist everywhere. Life as endurance, life as patience, life as the simple persistence of chemistry made aware of itself. There is a poetic symmetry in this. For centuries, humanity dreamed of civilizations beneath the earth, hidden realms of wisdom and light. What we have found instead is something smaller, humbler, yet no less extraordinary. The hidden inhabitants of the deep are not mythical peoples or ancient architects, but tiny, unseen travelers who have persisted since the dawn of time. Their presence humbles us, reminding us that life does not require grandeur to be sacred. Even in darkness, surrounded by silence and pressure, life finds a way to exist with grace. When we think of the planet now, we can no longer see it as a simple shell enclosing inert rock. Beneath us is a living labyrinth of microscopic beings, a silent ocean of cells that outnumber all surface life combined. They live in harmony with the heat of the core, drawing sustenance from the ancient chemistry of the planet's formation. They are, in every sense, the Earth's oldest citizens, not separate from it, but part of its slow, enduring breath. To imagine them is to feel the continuity of life, from the deepest ocean to the furthest mountain peak, all connected through the quiet pulse of the Earth itself. In this realization lies a kind of peace. The hidden biology of the deep reminds us that life is not fragile, nor is it confined to the light. It is everywhere in darkness, in heat, in silence, carrying forward the same calm persistence that has shaped the planet for billions of years. In the stillness beneath our feet, life continues, unseen but unbroken, a patient chorus humming softly in the language of stone and time. 9. Geological cathedrals. There are places beneath the earth where stone itself becomes architecture, where time has sculpted shapes so vast and intricate that they resemble the handiwork of gods. These are the great caverns and subterranean halls that stretch for miles in every direction, filled with the stillness of ages. To enter one is to feel that you have stepped into a sacred space, a cathedral not built by human hands but by the patient artistry of water, mineral, and time. The walls rise in rippled curtains, their surfaces smooth and glistening, and the air carries a faint scent of damp earth mixed with silence. In such places, the planet reveals its secret beauty, a kind of slow mineral grace that has been unfolding in darkness for millions of years. Caves begin simply, as water and stone meet in the long patience of erosion. Rain seeps through soil, absorbing carbon dioxide to form a mild acid, which then drips through cracks in limestone. Over centuries, those tiny droplets dissolve the rock, carving channels that grow into tunnels, chambers, and rivers underground. The process is almost invisible on the scale of human life, yet it never ceases. The slow rhythm of drip and flow, the dissolving of mineral and its redeposition elsewhere, gives rise to shapes that echo both fluid and bone stalactites hanging like frozen rain, stalagmites rising like patient spires to meet them. Together, they create columns that seem to hold up the weight of the world. Every one of them is a record of time, each layer a memory of countless seasons of dripping water. If one stands in a vast chamber deep underground, the sensation is unlike any other. Sound behaves differently there. A single footstep can echo for seconds, folding upon itself in soft reverberations that seem to come from every direction. The darkness is so complete that even light from a lamp feels shy, illuminating only a few meters before fading into the void. When the lamp is extinguished, sight itself dissolves. The air is cool, thick with moisture, and the silence feels alive, as though the stone is listening. It is easy to understand why early humans and explorers regarded caves as sacred. They resemble the inside of a living being, a heart of rock, pulsing with stillness. In many cultures, caves were places of initiation, where the living went to commune with spirits or gods. The Greeks told of the oracle at Delphi, where vapors from the earth carried visions. The Mayans built altars deep within limestone caverns to honor the rain god Chak. In India, temples were carved directly into cliff faces, merging architecture with geology until the distinction disappeared. These acts were not born of conquest over nature, but of reverence. The cave was seen as the dwelling of the eternal, a place where the veil between the human and the divine grew thin. Even now, when one enters a vast underground chamber, that feeling remains a quiet awe that has no need for words. Among the greatest of these natural cathedrals is the Mammoth Cave system in Kentucky, a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers that stretches for hundreds of kilometers beneath the surface. It is the longest known cave system on Earth, a network that has been forming for millions of years. Within its depths lie underground rivers, domed halls, and ancient fossils embedded in the walls. Visitors often describe a sense of disorientation, not from fear, but from the realization of scale, the understanding that the earth beneath is more spacious than the world above. There is something humbling about walking through corridors where the only sound is the steady drip of water, the slow, endless ticking of geological time. In Slovenia, the Škocjan caves open into a chamber so immense that an entire cathedral could fit within it many times over. The Reka River roars through the darkness, carving its path through limestone, vanishing into a deep chasm and re-emerging miles away. The ceiling arches high above, unseen except in the faint reflection of light upon wet stone. Standing there, one can almost sense the flow of eons, the quiet certainty that this place existed long before human eyes beheld it, and will continue long after they are gone. It is as though the earth herself built a sanctuary for her own thoughts. Other caverns, like the Waitomo glowworm caves in New Zealand, transform darkness into something luminous. The ceiling sparkles with thousands of tiny blue lights, created by bioluminescent insects that dangle glowing threads to catch drifting prey. To float through those caverns in silence is to feel suspended between two worlds, the deep earth and the night sky, as though the planet itself remembers the stars even from within its heart. These glowing caves remind us that life and stone are not separate, that even in the deepest chambers, existence finds a way to adorn the dark with gentle light. The shapes found in these caverns are often strange, even surreal. Draperies of stone fold like fabric, thin as parchment yet hard as crystal. Flowstones form rippling patterns that resemble frozen waterfalls. In some places, mineral pools create terraces of shimmering calcite, their edges outlined in pale gold. The process that creates these wonders is simple yet profound. Water, carrying dissolved minerals, deposits them as it evaporates, grain by grain, layer by layer, building beauty through repetition. What we see in these formations is patience made visible. They are sculptures not of intention but of inevitability, expressions of time itself. There are also caves that glitter like treasure vaults. In Nica, Mexico, lies the Cave of the Crystals, a chamber discovered 1,000 feet below the surface. Inside it, enormous selenite crystals grow in pillars the size of trees, some weighing more than 50 tons. The air there is scorching, reaching temperatures above 50 degrees Celsius and humidity close to 100%. To enter is to step into a furnace of beauty, deadly yet sublime. The crystals formed over hundreds of thousands of years, nurtured by mineral-rich water heated by magma. They are the slow poetry of geology, each one a luminous testament to what time can build when it has eternity to work with. In every corner of the world, such geological cathedrals exist. The deep marble caverns of Patagonia, where blue light filters through stone like water. The ice caves of Iceland, where glaciers melt and refreeze in translucent waves. The lava tubes of Hawaii, remnants of rivers of molten rock that once flowed like fire through the earth. Each formation tells a chapter of the same story, that creation and erosion, birth and decay, are inseparable. The beauty of these places lies not in their permanence, but in their transience. Every stalactite still grows, every river still carves, every crystal still forms. The cathedral is never finished. It is always in the act of becoming. For those who wander into these subterranean halls, there is a sense of intimacy with the planet rarely felt on the surface. Above ground, the world feels expansive and open, but beneath, one feels held. The air is close, the sounds muffled, the space defined by the gentle pressure of stone. It is as though the earth draws you inward, reminding you that everything alive has its roots below. The same minerals that shimmer in the cave walls run through the veins of our bodies. The calcium that forms stalactites also forms our bones. The carbon that shapes the stone shapes us too. Standing within these chambers, one can sense that kinship, a quiet recognition that we are not apart from the earth's processes, but expressions of them. There is also an emotional quiet that settles in such places. Without sunlight, the usual rhythms of day and night vanish, replaced by a timeless calm. The drip of water becomes a metronome for thought. The still air invites reflection. Many explorers speak of feeling a strange serenity, as though the weight of the world above transforms into a gentle embrace. The mind slows to match the pace of the rock, and in that stillness, one can almost hear the planet thinking. These caverns and cathedrals of stone are not simply geological curiosities. They are living temples to time records of patience, endurance, and transformation. Every ripple on the wall, every column and crystal, carries the story of millions of years written in the language of mineral and water. In the depths, where pressure and silence rule, beauty arises not from haste but from persistence. The earth builds slowly, endlessly, with a grace that needs no witness. To stand in those spaces is to remember that the planet beneath us is both artist and archive. It carves, polishes, and adorns itself with structures of such grandeur that words falter before them. These are the earth's cathedrals, sanctuaries not for worship, but for wonder. In their silence, we are reminded that time is not an enemy, but a patient sculptor, shaping even darkness into beauty. And in that realization, we find peace, for it is the same patience that shapes the stone that also shapes us. 10. Imagining the home of an ancient civilization, deep beneath the surface of the earth, where light has never shone and wind has never stirred, it is possible to imagine a world shaped not by sunlight but by stone. If an ancient civilization were to live in such a place, its home would not resemble the bright cities of the surface. There would be no streets of colour, no open skies, no division between inside and outside. Everything would be carved from the living rock, grown from the landscape itself. The architecture would follow the rhythms of the earth's interior, guided by the flow of mineral veins, the course of underground rivers, and the pulse of geothermal heat. In such a realm, the people would live not upon the planet, but within it a species at peace with the pressure and darkness that envelops them. To imagine their world is to picture a society in quiet harmony with its surroundings. Light, for them, would be precious, created through means that do not disturb the balance of their ecosystem. Perhaps their illumination would come from the soft glow of bioluminescent fungi, or the slow pulse of crystals charged by the planet's magnetic field. Instead of the blinding brightness of surface sunlight, their world would shimmer with gentle hues, silvers, blues, and greens, reflections that dance across mineral walls like the light of deep water. Their eyes, adapted over centuries to the dimness, might perceive subtleties of tone invisible to us, discerning warmth and depth where others see only shadow. In their vision, the dark would not be empty, but filled with texture and meaning. Their dwellings would follow the natural forms of the cavern's carved chambers joined by winding tunnels, vast halls supported by pillars of untouched stone. The architecture would not impose itself upon the earth but flow with it. Every curve, every arch, would serve both function and beauty, channeling the slow breath of air, the dripping of water, the echo of sound. The materials of their world would not be imported or forged, but drawn gently from the surroundings, obsidian smoothed to a mirror's sheen, quartz crystals woven into walls, and metals alloyed with care to resist corrosion in the damp. They would understand the language of stone, knowing how to listen to its creaks and murmurs, how to sense the shifting of pressure that foretells the movements of the earth. Water, the eternal sculptor of caverns, would be central to their lives. Underground rivers would serve as their roads, winding through the darkness like liquid threads of silver. Perhaps they would travel in vessels shaped from crystal or resin, gliding silently along the currents. The sound of flowing water would replace the song of wind and leaves, the music that echoes endlessly through their chambers. These rivers would not only sustain them but connect every part of their civilization, just as the veins of the earth carry its hidden lifeblood. They would treat each droplet as sacred, recycling every trace of moisture, drawing sustenance from condensation and underground springs warmed by the planet's core. In a world without seasons, time would flow differently. Without sunrise or sunset, their days would be measured by other rhythms, the slow pulse of geothermal energy, the growth of minerals, the migration of subterranean creatures. They might measure years by the dripping of water-forming stalactites, or by the cycles of faint magnetic shifts that ripple through the crust. Their calendars would not be written in paper or stone, but felt through the body, through intuition and tradition passed down by touch and song. Time, for them, would be circular, not linear, an endless returning, like the movement of water through the veins of the earth. The art of such a civilization would be an art of resonance. In the silence of the deep, sound carries far, folding upon itself until a single note can fill a hall like a living presence. They would use this quality to create music that blends with the natural acoustics of the rock. Their instruments might be carved from hollow crystals or strings stretched across mineral pillars. The songs they sing would not only please the ear but communicate meaning through vibration, allowing them to share emotion even without words. The patterns of sound could serve as memory, carrying stories across generations. Their history, preserved not in books but in echo, would live within the very walls of their home. Their society would have evolved to value stillness and endurance over haste. In a world where change occurs slowly and movement is limited, wisdom would arise from observation rather than conquest. Theirs would be a culture of patience, artisans who carve sculptures that take lifetimes to complete, scientists who study the growth of a single crystal over centuries, and thinkers who measure progress not in years but in cycles of the Earth's heartbeat. The pace of their civilization would mirror the slow movements of the mantle above them, a rhythm of persistence and quiet creation. Life underground would demand balance between technology and restraint. To survive in such conditions, they would have mastered the art of drawing energy from geothermal heat, harnessing the natural warmth of the planet for light, power, and sustenance. Their tools and machines, if they had them, would not roar or smoke but hum softly, blending into the stillness. Theirs would be a technology of harmony, not dominance, a science that learns from the natural systems of the planet rather than exploiting them. Perhaps their greatest invention would be silence itself, the ability to live without disturbing the delicate equilibrium of their world. Food in such a civilization would come not from fields or forests but from intricate networks of fungi, algae, and bacteria, cultivated in nutrient-rich chambers. They would farm lightless crops that feed on minerals and heat, creating cycles of growth sustained entirely by the planet's internal energy. In this way, they would become an extension of the Earth's own ecology, transforming geological energy into biological life. The concept of hunger would be minimal, for their diet would be simple, efficient, and cyclical. Nothing wasted, nothing lost. The Earth provides, and they in turn care for it. Socially, they might live in small, interconnected communities rather than sprawling cities. Cooperation would be vital, for isolation in such a world could mean death. Their communication would rely as much on empathy and shared rhythm as on language. To understand one another, they would listen not just to words, but to the cadence of breathing, the resonance of tone. In such intimacy, deceit would fade, replaced by the quiet trust of those who know they depend upon each other completely. Spirituality, too, would be woven deeply into their daily life. To them, the earth itself would be sacred not as an abstract idea, but as a tangible, living presence. They might believe that the planet's slow movements are the gestures of a vast consciousness, that its heat is the breath of creation, and that every drop of water or flicker of crystal light is part of a larger spirit. Their prayers, if they prayed, would be songs of gratitude, resonating through the tunnels until they merged with the hum of the planet itself. Perhaps they would not even distinguish between science and faith. Both would be expressions of wonder toward the same enduring mystery. When imagining such a civilization, one feels a quiet peace. Their world would not be loud or hurried, but contemplative, It would be a society shaped by necessity into harmony, by darkness into clarity, by stillness into strength. They would not fear the absence of light because they would have found another kind of illumination, one born of patience and understanding. If ever they once existed, perhaps traces of their presence still linger in the deep earth carvings worn smooth by time, crystals etched with strange patterns, echoes that no instrument can explain. Or perhaps they exist only in imagination, an idealized reflection of what we might become if we learn to live gently within the rhythms of our planet. In their world of shadow and stone, one truth would prevail: that life, when it listens deeply enough, finds harmony even in the heart of darkness. And in that stillness the earth would not be their prison, but their home, vast, eternal, and filled with quiet light. 11. Architecture of the depths. If an ancient civilization had made its home within the earth, its architecture would have been born not from ambition, but from understanding. On the surface, humanity builds toward the sky, defying gravity and time in towers of stone, glass, and metal. But underground, the art of creation would take the opposite path downward, inward, guided by the natural flow of the planet. In such a world, the builder is not a conqueror but a collaborator. Every structure would exist in conversation with the rock that surrounds it, each curve and corridor shaped to respect the slow movements of pressure and temperature that govern life below. In this realm, architecture would not merely shelter its inhabitants, it would breathe with them, harmonizing with the deep rhythm of the earth. The foundation of any subterranean world is patience. To carve from stone is to listen, to move with deliberate stillness. The first architects of the depths would have learned this by necessity. They would have begun with the natural caverns, hollow spaces formed by water and time, and expanded them gradually, guided by instinct and vibration rather than sight. Each chamber would be an echo of the planet's natural shapes: domed roofs, like inverted seashells, curved walls following the grain of the rock, passages aligned with natural fissures to ease the strain of the overlying weight. Nothing would be straight, for in the deep earth, the straight line does not exist. Instead, every surface would flow in quiet curves, like the patterns of a river or the rings of a shell. The materials of such architecture would come not from external sources but from the earth itself. The builders would carve into limestone and basalt, shaping walls from what was already present. Where stone was brittle or porous, they might reinforce it with minerals dissolved in the underground waters: calcite, silica, or iron that harden over time like the healing of a wound. They might harness the process of stalactite formation deliberately, directing mineral-rich drips to build decorative columns that grow slowly, decade after decade, into graceful forms. In this way, their architecture would never truly be finished. It would continue to grow and evolve, like a living organism, renewing itself in silence. Light would be a rare and sacred element in such a world. The architecture of illumination would be subtle pools of bioluminescent life, cultivated in shallow basins, corridors lined with crystals that glow faintly from geothermal warmth, reflective minerals placed strategically to carry the dim radiance through the chambers. The result would not be brightness, but depth, a play of shadow and shimmer that reveals more than it conceals. Rooms would appear to breathe with light, the walls glimmering softly as though the rock itself were alive. For the people of the depths, light would not divide space but unite it, transforming every chamber into a sanctuary of gentle glow. Air, too, would be carefully shaped. Without the free winds of the surface, the architecture would serve as the lungs of their world. Narrow vertical shafts would draw in currents from the surface or from other caverns, channeling them through networks of resonant tunnels. The design would follow the principle of balance: warm air rising from the geothermal depths, cool air descending from higher chambers, creating a continuous cycle. Some passages might serve dual purposes, both as routes of movement and as arteries for air and sound. The very architecture would hum with the life it sustains, carrying the faint whisper of circulation through its stone veins. The use of sound would be integral to the design. In the deep earth, where sight is limited, acoustics would become the language of navigation and art. Corridors might be tuned to resonate at specific frequencies, allowing travelers to sense direction through subtle changes in echo. Grand halls would be constructed not only for gathering but for listening, their domes amplifying even the softest tone into a chorus that fills the space. The builders would understand the physics of vibration intuitively, crafting chambers that sing when touched by a voice or a bell. Each structure would thus become both home and instrument, resonating with the harmony of those who live within it. The aesthetic of this civilization would be one of unity with nature. Ornamentation would arise from function rather than excess. Walls might bear flowing reliefs of mineral veins, polished to reveal the hidden beauty of quartz and feldspar. Floors could be mosaics of sedimentary layers, telling the story of the rock's own formation. The architecture would not attempt to hide the imperfections of the earth, for to these people, the marks of pressure and time would be sacred symbols of endurance. Beauty would lie not in symmetry, but in continuity. Everything would seem to grow organically, as though the buildings themselves had emerged from the rock like crystals forming in a geode. In their public spaces, the gathering halls, the places of thought or ritual, the scale would expand into grandeur. Imagine vast caverns supported by pillars that merge seamlessly with the ceiling, shaped to distribute the immense weight above. Between them, open plazas of stone where water pools mirror the faint lights of the walls. Around the edges, carved terraces for rest and reflection. These would not be cities in the surface sense, but networks of sanctuaries, connected by flowing tunnels and underground rivers. The effect would be serene and otherworldly architecture that feels less like construction and more like revelation, as though the planet itself had decided to open its heart to those who dwell within. Private dwellings would be smaller and quieter, carved into the walls of larger chambers or along the banks of underground streams. The boundaries between home and environment would be subtle, almost invisible. Walls would curve inward like the interior of a shell, providing both structure and comfort. Instead of windows, niches filled with softly glowing minerals would mark the passage of time. The sound of dripping water or the slow resonance of distant activity would provide a kind of natural rhythm, replacing the ticking of clocks. To live in such a home would be to exist in unbroken connection with the world around you, each breath mingling with the slow pulse of the stone. Sustainability would not be a philosophy, but a necessity. The architecture of the depths would be designed for eternity, not because it resists change, but because it embraces it. Walls would absorb moisture and release it again, preventing decay. Floors would channel runoff towards central cisterns. Waste would be recycled through biological and geological systems, transformed back into mineral form. The people of the depths would understand that permanence is not achieved through strength alone, but through balance. Their structures would endure because they move with the planet rather than against it. In such a civilization, architecture would also be a form of memory. Each generation might carve its own symbols into the stone, adding to a growing archive of patterns, marks, and stories. The walls themselves would become their books' libraries, written in texture rather than text. Perhaps the oldest chambers would bear carvings so faint and eroded that they resemble natural strata, their meaning preserved only in oral tradition. The deeper one ventures into their world, the older the architecture would become, until at last it merges completely with the living rock, the border between creation and nature erased. To walk through the architecture of the depths would be to enter a dialogue between matter and meaning. Every arch, every corridor, would remind its inhabitants that they are guests within a vast and ancient body. Unlike surface civilizations that reach upward in defiance of gravity, theirs would celebrate gravity as grace, allowing it to anchor rather than burden. They would measure beauty not in height or ornament, but in resonance in how sound, light, and air weave together to form peace. Perhaps, if such a civilization ever existed, remnants of their artistry still sleep within the earth. Smooth corridors mistaken for geological fractures, chambers whose acoustics seem too perfect to be chance, veins of polished stone, shaped into symmetry by unknown hands. Or perhaps their architecture exists only in the imagination, an echo of humanity's own longing for harmony with the planet we inhabit. In either case, the idea endures because it feels right. The deep earth is not a place of destruction but of transformation, and any beings wise enough to call it home would build not to dominate but to belong. Their architecture, grown from darkness and silence, would embody the earth's most enduring lesson, that beauty does not always require light, and that the truest creations are those that last because they listen. Within the pressure and stillness of the underground, these imagined builders would have learned what it means to create with humility, to let the stone itself decide the shape of the dream. 12. The ecology of eternal night. In the endless twilight of the deep earth, where no dawn ever breaks and no seasons turn, life must find its rhythm in other ways. It is a world without the familiar cycles of sunlight and shadow, where warmth rises not from the sun but from the slow breath of the planet itself. To imagine an ecology here is to envision a delicate balance, an intricate web of energy flowing not from photosynthesis but from chemistry, from the transformation of minerals and the patient movement of water. The creatures and plants, if we may call them that in such an eternal night, would have evolved not to chase light but to live in its absence. Every breath, every pulse of life would be shaped by darkness, pressure, and time. In this imagined world, there would be no trees stretching toward the sky, no leaves shimmering in the wind. Instead, the foundations of life would begin with the smallest of beings, microorganisms, thriving in warm mineral springs, feeding on sulfur, iron, and methane. These would be the deep Earth's equivalents of surface plants, the primary producers that sustain the entire ecosystem. They would form thin mats upon the walls of underground rivers, their colonies glowing faintly with chemical luminescence, transforming the energy of the planet's interior into nourishment. Around them, tiny grazers would drift, translucent, creatures with slow, deliberate movements, feeding on the microbial film as it shimmers across the stone. The water itself would be a carrier of life, flowing through vast labyrinths of tunnels and pools. Here, fish without eyes would navigate by vibration and scent, their bodies pale and almost ghostly. Their skin might sense the faint electrical fields of the rocks around them, allowing them to move effortlessly through the maze. Some would travel in schools that pulse like a single organism, moving with the rhythm of the current. Others might cling to the walls, feeding on the fine organic dust that drifts down from above the remains of ancient surface life carried slowly into the depths. Among these waters, fungi would reign as the quiet recyclers of the underworld. Their networks would stretch through the stone, invisible filaments feeding on mineral residue and decaying matter. Some species might emit soft bioluminescent glows, forming veils of light that hang across the walls like stars suspended in stillness. They would provide both nourishment and light for other organisms, their glow guiding insects and small creatures through the darkness. The architecture of this ecosystem would be built upon mutual exchange. Nothing wasted, nothing in excess, every element feeding into another. Imagine a vast cavern where the ceiling drips with condensation, feeding a lake of clear, mineral-rich water. Along the edges of this lake grow mats of pale moss, nourished by geothermal warmth and the gases seeping from below. Tiny crustaceans move through the shallows, their transparent shells catching the faint shimmer of phosphorescent fungi. Above them, the air carries drifting spores, microscopic travelers seeking new surfaces to claim. The entire space hums with quiet life, yet it is a life almost imperceptible, so slow and subtle that centuries might pass before any noticeable change occurs. In such an environment, balance would be absolute. Energy here is scarce, so nothing could afford waste. Every breath and movement would be measured, every organism tuned to efficiency. Predators, if they exist, would be patient hunters, conserving energy as they wait in the stillness for the smallest vibration that betrays the presence of prey. Perhaps they would resemble pale serpents or slow-moving cephalopods, their bodies sleek and silent. Their senses would be extraordinary, capable of detecting the faintest shifts in temperature or the softest ripple in water. Yet even these hunters would depend ultimately on the humble chemotrophs that harvest energy from the minerals of the deep. All life, whether on the surface or below, depends on those that turn the unseen into sustenance. The air of the deep world would be different, thicker, heavier, and filled with minerals. Oxygen might exist only in trace amounts, replaced by other gases like methane or hydrogen sulfide. The organisms here would breathe differently, exchanging elements through processes unfamiliar to surface biology. To them, the smell that we might find acrid or poisonous would be the scent of life itself. Every breath would connect them more deeply to the planet, a literal communion with the chemistry of stone and water. The energy that sustains them would come from decay and renewal, from the planet's slow transformation of heat into matter. Without sunlight, the colours of this world would exist in a different register. Instead of greens and blues, the palette would be subtle shades of ivory, silver and amber where bioluminescence spills across rock. The creatures might shimmer faintly, their skins reflecting mineral light like pearl. The rivers might appear as glowing threads in the darkness, winding through caverns of black stone. It would be a beauty of quiet understatement, one that invites stillness rather than astonishment. In this world, light would not illuminate in bursts, but breathe gently, ebbing and flowing like the tide of life itself. The inhabitants of an ancient civilization living within this ecology would have learned long ago to live in harmony with it. Their survival would depend on protecting the fragile balance of their environment. They would understand the delicacy of the food chain, the importance of each unseen organism. Perhaps they would cultivate the glowing fungi, shaping their patterns across ceilings to provide both light and oxygen. They might harvest minerals from warm springs, not to exploit them, but to feed the microorganisms that form the base of their sustenance. Agriculture, as we know it, would not exist. Instead, they would practice ecological stewardship, tending to the planet as one tends to a breathing organism. To live here would be to perceive the world through senses attuned to subtleties. Instead of sight, the people might rely on vibration, on temperature, on resonance. They would feel the movement of water through stone and sense the slow trembling of the planet's interior. They might navigate by sound, mapping their world through echoes and harmonics, as bats and dolphins do on the surface. Theirs would be a life of listening, each moment a dialogue with the earth. Their relationship with time would also mirror the slowness of their surroundings. In the absence of day and night, existence would flow as a continuous present. Their perception of time might be measured not in hours, but in pulses, the steady rhythm of water dripping from stalactites, or the deep tremor of geothermal currents rising through the crust. Birth, growth, and decay would lose their boundaries, blending into one another in an unbroken cycle. Death would not be seen as an end, but as transformation, a return of energy to the mineral world that sustains all life below. It is possible to imagine rituals built around this exchange, ceremonies where they release their dead into warm subterranean pools, allowing their bodies to be dissolved and reabsorbed into the earth's chemistry. In doing so, they would complete the circle of existence, offering themselves back to the same forces that nourished them. Such beliefs would not be born from fear but from deep reverence. In a world where the boundary between life and matter is so faint, spirituality and ecology would become indistinguishable. To care for the earth would be to care for the self, for the two would be one and the same. There is a serenity in imagining such a world, not because it is simple, but because it is balanced. Every organism, every current of water, every flicker of light serves its purpose with quiet grace. The ecology of eternal night is an ecosystem of patience, an existence without haste or excess, where even decay is beautiful. To witness it, even in imagination, is to sense the wisdom of the planet's hidden heart. And if such a civilization once lived within this darkness, perhaps their greatest achievement was not their architecture or their technology, but their harmony. They would have learned what the surface world often forgets, that life thrives not through domination, but through balance, not through brightness, but through stillness. In their quiet chambers beneath the earth, surrounded by the slow pulse of living stone, they would have created an enduring truth, that even in the deepest darkness the planet itself remains alive, breathing softly through every grain of dust, every drop of water, every unseen spark of being. 13. Energy and light. Without a sun, in a world that has never seen the sun, energy must find other paths. The great source of warmth that sustains all life on the surface, the burning star that commands the rhythms of growth, rest, and renewal, cannot reach the depths. And yet, life in the deep earth endures. It does so not by defying the laws of nature, but by following them differently. To imagine the life of an underground civilization is to imagine an existence woven from the planet's own internal strength, ecology, and a society built upon energy that rises not from the sky but from the quiet furnace within. Theirs would be a world lit by the memory of the Earth's birth, a realm illuminated by the soft light of minerals, heat, and living chemistry. Beneath the crust, the Earth's heat is constant, an inheritance from its earliest formation when molten rock gathered and cooled into form. Radioactive decay, pressure, and the slow churning of the mantle generate a warmth that seeps upward in silence. For the people of the deep, this geothermal energy would be both their sun and their heartbeat. It would provide the foundation for all that they build, grow, and believe. Their homes would draw warmth from natural vents and fissures, their tools and systems designed to capture and channel it without disturbing its flow. Perhaps they would construct conduits lined with crystalline minerals that conduct heat efficiently, creating gentle gradients of temperature throughout their chambers. Where the surface world kindles fire, they would harness the fire that already exists, taming it not with force but with understanding. In such a society, light would be born from chemistry and biology rather than flame. Fire, as we know it, would have little place underground, for it consumes air and leaves nothing behind but ash and smoke. Instead, the inhabitants of this hidden world would have learned to cultivate life that glows the quiet, patient luminescence of fungi, algae, and insects that transform chemical energy into radiance. Entire gardens might shimmer with a soft silver-green glow, casting reflections across pools of mineral water. Walls could be lined with living veils of lichen that breathe light instead of leaves. These organisms would serve both aesthetic and practical purposes, transforming the dark into a landscape of colour and calm. Light, here, would not banish darkness but coexist with it, creating an atmosphere of perpetual dusk enough to see, enough to feel, never enough to dazzle. Some of the light might come from minerals themselves. The Earth's crust is filled with crystals that respond to pressure, temperature, or magnetic fields with faint luminescence. Quartz, calcite, and fluorite can trap energy within their structures and release it as a glow when stimulated. The deep dwellers might understand these properties intuitively, crafting walls embedded with crystals that shimmer when touched or when the Earth shifts. The architecture would pulse with gentle light, mirroring the movements of the planet, a breathing illumination that changes with the tremors of the deep. In this way, their world would seem alive not only in sound and motion, but in colour, each glimmer a reminder that the stone itself participates in their existence. Energy, in this civilization, would flow in cycles, as seamless and balanced as the ecosystems that sustain it. Heat from geothermal vents would power their instruments, perhaps through principles similar to the surface world's thermoelectricity, converting temperature differences into usable energy. Water heated by the planet's core would rise, turn turbines or organic mechanisms, and cool as it descended again, forming a continuous circulation. Waste heat could be stored in vast thermal reservoirs, natural aquifers transformed into batteries of warmth. There would be no waste, no smoke, no flame. Everything would return to equilibrium, as though their technology were another organ in the body of the Earth. Because light and energy would be so intertwined with biology, the deep dwellers' relationship with them would be spiritual as much as practical. Their understanding of illumination would go beyond physics. It would carry meaning. To them, light would not symbolize dominance or revelation, but continuity. The gentle bioluminescence that sustains their days would remind them that life persists, even without the sun, that warmth and brightness can arise from within. Their legends might tell of the first lights, perhaps tiny sparks that appeared in the darkness, guiding their ancestors through the caverns. These luminous beings or events could have been seen as gifts from the planet, tokens of its awareness, symbols of trust between life and stone. Over time, the cultivation of light might become an act of devotion, each new glow a small affirmation of gratitude toward the Earth that shelters them. Energy in this world would never be hoarded. In the absence of abundance, balance would be law. Every flame, every glimmer would serve a purpose. Homes might share warmth through connected stone conduits, allowing communities to regulate temperature collectively. Excess energy from geothermal sources could be stored in crystalline matrices, glowing gently as they release heat and light back into the environment over days or weeks. Even the simplest tools might be designed to use resonance, harnessing the vibration of sound or the flow of water to perform work. Such efficiency would not arise from scarcity alone, but from reverence. To waste energy would be to disturb the harmony that sustains all things. For these people, darkness itself would be sacred. It would not represent ignorance or fear, but rest. They would understand that light has meaning only because of the dark that surrounds it. Their cities, if we could call them that, might dim and brighten according to collective need, glowing softly when activity stirs, fading when the time for rest arrives. The darkness would be complete but never cold, a comforting presence filled with the quiet hum of geothermal life. Their sleep, their meditation, their celebrations would all occur within this symphony of dim light and shadow, where illumination is not constant but rhythmic, like breathing. Over time, their bodies would adapt to this relationship with light and energy. Their skin might grow pale and reflective, their eyes larger to gather faint luminescence perhaps, even sensitive to heat itself. They would see in spectrums beyond human perception, able to detect warmth as colour, magnetism as movement. To them, the flow of geothermal energy might appear as auroras within the stone, shifting in slow waves across the walls. Light would not be external but internal, a sense, a language, an intuition. They would move through their world, guided not by sight alone, but by the deep sensory awareness that connects them to the planet's pulse. Communication, too, could be tied to energy. Sound would travel clearly through rock, allowing them to use low vibrations or harmonics to send messages across vast distances. Some structures might act as amplifiers, resonating with the frequencies of their voices powered by the same forces that heat their world. Even language might evolve to incorporate these vibrations, a blend of tone, rhythm, and touch that conveys both meaning and emotion. Every word would be an act of energy exchange, a subtle reminder that communication itself is a kind of light. In such a society, the concept of scarcity would fade into that of balance. Where the surface world builds its power from extraction and combustion, the world below would build from resonance and renewal. Their philosophy would mirror the steady flow of heat through the planet's core, neither sudden nor wasteful, but constant. They would have no need to conquer their environment, for their survival would depend on listening to it. Theirs would be a science of observation, an art of attunement. Perhaps, when they look inward, they would feel what we might call the soul of the earth, that deep, steady hum that all things share but few can hear. They would understand that energy is not merely something to use, but something to join. Light, for them, would not be a thing to possess, but a state of being, the visible whisper of life itself. And in the heart of that endless night, they would find beauty in the smallest flicker, the radiance of a fungus, the shimmer of crystal under pressure, the heat of the stone that cradles them. This is how they would live, in a world where the sun is a memory, and yet light endures. A world where warmth is born from within, and every glimmer is both energy and prayer. They would have learned that existence does not depend on the sky, but on the quiet generosity of the planet's core. In their calm and patient civilization, the night would never end, and yet it would never feel dark. The earth itself would be their lantern, its ancient fire breathing gently through stone, sustaining them as it has sustained life since the beginning of time. 14. The sound of a stone world. In the surface world, sound is carried by air, a delicate trembling of invisible particles that we take for granted each time a bird calls or a river moves through its bed. But deep beneath the ground, in a realm without wind or open sky, sound takes on a different nature. It moves not through air but through the density of stone, through water pooled in caverns, and through the slow, trembling vibration of the planet itself. The result is a world where silence is not the absence of sound, but a deeper kind of music, a symphony of low, resonant tones that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. In such a world, every vibration matters, and hearing becomes more than a sense, it becomes a way of knowing. For those who might live within the earth, sound would not be fleeting or light, but profound and physical. It would move through the body as much as through the ears, pressing against the bones and resonating in the chest. In the darkness, hearing would replace sight as the primary language of perception. The smallest drop of water, the faintest crack of shifting rock, the breath of air passing through a narrow passage, all would become part of an endless acoustic landscape. The people of this world would learn to listen with extraordinary sensitivity, reading the world through vibration as one might read the currents of the sea. To them, the earth itself would not be silent. Beneath the crust, the planet hums constantly, a deep background resonance caused by the movement of its oceans, its winds, and its molten heart. Scientists on the surface call it the Earth's hum, a faint vibration always present, even in stillness. But those who dwell within might know it more intimately, not as noise, but as the heartbeat of their world. They would feel its rhythm through their feet, their walls, their tools. It would guide their sense of time, the steady pulse beneath the more fleeting sounds of their daily life. In this way, they would live in unbroken dialogue with the planet, aware of its every sigh and shift. Their cities, if such things could exist underground, would be built with sound in mind. Every chamber, every corridor would be designed to shape resonance, to soften harsh echoes, to amplify gentle tones, to create balance. The architecture would sing in response to movement, footsteps, and voices. The walls, polished smooth or carved in gentle curves, would act as instruments tuned to the frequency of the surrounding stone. Even their doors might hum faintly when opened, releasing low vibrations like the strings of an enormous harp. In this world, communication would not end at words. It would flow through the physical environment itself. Their voices, too, would have adapted to the deep. In air thick with moisture and dust, they might speak more slowly, using tones that travel well through dense mediums. Their speech could resemble a kind of chant, with drawn-out syllables that echo softly through the tunnels. Or perhaps they would abandon speech altogether in favor of resonance, humming, tapping, or striking the stone in rhythmic patterns that carry information across distance. The walls themselves might act as conduits, transmitting the message farther than sound could travel through air. Communication in such a the world would be more than verbal. It would be architectural, geological, and musical all at once. Music, as we know it, would take on new meaning here. The deep dwellers might use their environment as both instrument and stage. Vast caverns would serve as natural amphitheatres, their acoustics perfect for long, sustained tones that hang in the air like fog. Instruments might be built from the materials around them, strings stretched across crystal frames, drums carved from stone and filled with mineral water, flutes shaped from hollow stalactites. When played, their music would not merely entertain but interact with the world, setting off harmonics that reverberate through walls and water. A single note might linger for minutes, merging with the ambient hum of the earth. In their culture, music would not be performed for others but for the planet itself, a form of communion, a gesture of resonance between beings and their home. They would also use sound as a means of navigation. Just as bats and dolphins use echolocation, the inhabitants of this realm might send out low-frequency tones to map their surroundings. The reflections of these tones would reveal the shape of their environment, the depth of tunnels, the presence of water, the movement of other living things. Their ears, or whatever sensory organs they possess, would be capable of perceiving the faintest delay, the most subtle difference in echo. Over time, this ability would become instinctive. They would know the size and shape of a space without ever seeing it. To them, the world would appear not in light and shadow, but in waves and reverberations. In moments of quiet, they would still hear the deeper music, the slow grinding of tectonic plates, the sigh of magma moving through distant chambers, the distant song of underground rivers. These sounds would be immense yet intimate, filling the body with a sense of belonging. The people might interpret them as messages or omens, the language of the earth itself. A deep rumble could signify change, while a faint, rising tone might mark the passing of seasons as heat and pressure shift. In such a world, prophecy and science would be indistinguishable, for both would depend on listening. There would be no sharp boundary between noise and silence. Instead, there would be a continuum, the whisper of air, the pulse of blood, the quiet trembling of stone. Silence in this world would not be empty but full, a resting place between vibrations. To the inhabitants, it might feel like the presence of something vast and kind, an enveloping calm that holds all sound within it. They might gather in silence as one gathers before a sacred fire, not to escape noise but to honor the stillness that makes all sound possible. Even their tools and technologies would operate through resonance. They might have learned to store energy in vibrating crystals, to heat materials by channeling frequencies through stone, or to communicate over vast distances using the planet's own acoustic channels. Sound, for them, would not be an afterthought but a primary force, a way to move, to build, to connect. Their science would be based not on control but on harmony, finding the natural frequencies that align with matter and using them gently, without disruption. It is easy to imagine their rituals. Perhaps, during times of gathering, they would fill their great halls with sustained tones, each participant contributing a single note until the air itself begins to shimmer with vibration. The sound would merge and expand, resonating through walls and bodies alike until no individual voice could be distinguished. It would be both music and meditation, a reminder that each being is part of a larger chord, a shared resonance within the greater body of the earth. When the sound fades, the silence that follows would feel alive, vibrating with memory. For them, Sound would be both creation and preservation. Where the surface world writes its the history in ink and stone, the deep dwellers would record theirs in vibration, songs that encode knowledge, stories carried through generations as patterns of tone and rhythm. Their history would not be static but living, changing slightly with each retelling as new voices join the chorus. To listen to these ancient songs would be to feel the presence of countless lives, all resonating through the same medium, the eternal, singing stone. Perhaps, in the deepest parts of the earth, such sounds still echo. Perhaps the planet itself remembers them. The tones of civilizations long vanished, absorbed into its hum. The surface world may never hear them, for its own noise is too loud, too restless. But if one could descend far enough, beyond the reach of wind and rain, one might catch it a faint vibration, a chord that seems to come from the bones of the planet, older than speech, older than memory. It would be the sound of belonging, of life in perfect harmony with its world. In the end, the sound of a stone world is not a melody but a feeling. It is the awareness that everything vibrates, that every existence leaves a trace of resonance in the medium of time. The deep dwellers would know this instinctively. They would listen not just with their ears but with their hearts, hearing in every tremor the quiet assurance that they are part of something vast and enduring. And when they speak, when they hum, sing, or simply breathe, the earth would answer. Its reply carried not in words but in the soft, endless music of being. 15. Culture in the depths. Culture in the depths would have evolved like a mineral, slow, layered, and enduring. In a world where light is scarce and time flows gently, the people would have learned to build meaning not through haste, but through accumulation. Every tradition, every gesture, would carry centuries of quiet refinement. They would live in a civilization that does not rush to create or to change, but instead allows customs to crystallize naturally, shaped by the pressures and silences of their subterranean world. Culture, for them, would not be a thing separate from life, but its constant expression, embedded in every sound, every shared breath, every luminous chamber carved from stone. Their sense of community would be rooted in intimacy. In the depths, isolation is dangerous. Silence and distance can divide as easily as rock can. And so their society would thrive on cooperation, on the awareness that every individual is sustained by the collective. Families might not exist as separate households, but as clusters of shared dwellings connected by corridors of warmth and water. Life would be communal by design. Meals, work, and even rest might take place together in circular halls where the sound of voices blends into a gentle harmony. Privacy would not be prized as solitude is on the surface. Instead, connection would be the core of identity. The self would be known through others, like one note known only by the chord it completes. Their relationships would mirror the ecology that surrounds them, reciprocal and cyclical. Just as the fungi and bacteria recycle every particle of energy in the underground ecosystem, the people would learn to exchange rather than consume. Goods, knowledge, and care would circulate freely, sustained by mutual trust. To take more than one needs would not merely be unethical, it would be unthinkable, an act that disturbs the delicate equilibrium on which all depend. In such a world, generosity would be less a virtue than a natural state, as necessary as breathing. Their art would be born from sound and texture rather than sight. In the dim glow of bioluminescent fungi, colours would be subdued, and the artists would turn instead to tactile forms. Sculpture would be their language of emotion, smooth carvings that fit perfectly into the hand, patterns etched so subtly that they invite touch more than vision. Perhaps they would inscribe their songs into stone, not as written words but as grooves and ripples that carry vibration when brushed or struck. In this way, their art would be felt rather than seen, each piece capable of resonating softly, producing a tone that completes a greater harmony. A gallery in their world would not be silent. It would hum quietly, a chorus of memory and creation intertwined. Music would hold a sacred place in their culture. With sound so vital to their understanding of space, music would be more than entertainment. It would be the pulse of their civilization. Their songs would not follow melody as we know it, but the slow, rising and falling tones of the earth itself. Choirs might gather in great caverns, their voices blending into frequencies that match the resonance of the stone around them. A single note, sustained for minutes, could fill the chamber like fog, vibrating through every surface until it seems the earth is singing back. To participate in such music would be an act of unity, each person becoming a vessel for sound, each voice a continuation of the planet's hum. These gatherings would be both ritual and celebration, not moments of performance, but moments of belonging. Their stories, too, would flow through vibration and memory. Oral tradition would be their library, but it would not rely solely on words. Stories might be sung in tones that carry more than meaning, tones that mimic the movements of water, the rhythm of heartbeats, the shifting of stone. Listeners would close their eyes and feel the tale as much as hear it, the resonance passing through their bones. Generations would add to the stories, never erasing what came before, only layering new notes over old, like strata forming in the crust. Their myths would grow vast and slow, describing the deep as a living being and themselves as its quiet thoughts. Rituals would mark the rhythm of their lives, not through spectacle, but through harmony. Birth might be celebrated by placing the newborn's hand against the stone, introducing them to the touch and vibration of the world that shelters them. Death would be a return, as bodies are given back to the mineral pools, where they dissolve and become one again with the deep chemistry of life. Festivals would align with the cycles of geothermal tides, times when the Earth's heat surges or recedes. On such nights, the caverns might glow brighter with cultivated light, and the people would gather to sing and share warmth, reaffirming their bond with the forces that sustain them. Their philosophy would center around listening. To them, wisdom would not come from speaking, but from silence, from the ability to hear what the earth whispers beneath the constant hum. Children would be taught early to still themselves, to feel the faint tremors that travel through the ground, to understand that each vibration carries meaning. The greatest thinkers among them would not be those who speak most eloquently, but those who listen most deeply. They would seek balance between their inner rhythm and the rhythm of the world, believing that peace comes when the two align. Education in this society would not be structured through competition or hierarchy. Knowledge would be shared freely, passed through story, song, and demonstration. The young would learn by watching the hands of elders, by tracing their fingers over carvings that reveal geological history, by listening to the layered chants that encode scientific and spiritual understanding alike. To study would not be to memorize facts, but to perceive patterns, the relationship between water and stone, between sound and form, between action and consequence. Their learning would be circular, not linear, flowing back into the community as each generation refines the lessons of the last. Technology would exist, but it would appear organic, inseparable from nature. Tools might be shaped from crystals that vibrate in response to touch, powered by geothermal, warmth, or magnetic resonance. Every invention would aim not to control the environment but to harmonize with it. Their machines would hum softly, their lights breathe gently, their systems of energy and communication echo the patterns of living organisms. Progress for them would not mean expansion, but refinement, a deepening of understanding, a quieter perfection. Their sense of beauty would be subtle, measured not in grandeur but in balance. A perfect space, to them, would be one where sound carries evenly, where the air feels alive, and where light glows in natural harmony with shadow. Their jewelry might consist of small crystals that resonate when touched, producing a soft tone that identifies its wearer. Their clothing, woven from fibers of mineral and fungus, would shimmer faintly, catching the dim light like the skin of deep-sea creatures. Everything they create would speak quietly, echoing the stillness that defines their existence. Over time, this culture would achieve a kind of serenity unknown to the surface world. Conflict would be rare, for in the depths, there is little room for wasteful struggle. The cost of imbalance is too high. Instead, they would cultivate patience and empathy as tools of survival. To them, anger would be a disturbance in resonance, a sound that jars against the harmony of the whole. Healing would be an act of restoring that balance not just within a person, but within the community. Their leaders would not rule through force, but through attunement, chosen for their ability to listen and to bring sound and silence back into alignment. To imagine such a culture is to glimpse what humanity might become if it learned to live with the same humility. A society that listens more than it speaks, that builds not for display but for endurance, that finds beauty in continuity rather than conquest. The culture of the depths would be timeless, not because it resists change, but because it changes so slowly, like the Earth itself. It would be a civilization that understands that true progress is not in expansion upward, but but in growing inward toward understanding, toward harmony, toward peace. And when their songs finally fade, if they ever do, perhaps the stone will remember. Perhaps the vibrations of their lives, their voices, their stories will linger in the rock, imperceptible to us but eternal to the planet that held them. For culture, like sound, never truly vanishes. It travels through the medium of time, softening as it goes, until it becomes part of the background hum of existence, the quiet music of a world that once was, and in some hidden way, still is. 16. Belief and the spirit of the earth. In the vast, quiet reaches beneath the crust, belief would take a shape entirely unlike that of the surface. In a world where the sky is never seen, where stars and seasons are unknown, spirituality would not look upward but inward. The people of the deep would feel divinity not as a distant power, but as the warmth and motion within the earth itself. A slow, patient consciousness breathing through stone, water, and heat. For them, the sacred would not be something separate from the physical world. It would be the world, vast and alive, its every pulse a message, its every tremor a whisper of intention. In such an environment, the foundation of belief would grow from gratitude. Each day, though, day, may not be the right word for a place where light never changes, would begin with the awareness that their lives depend on the balance of heat, water, and rock that surrounds them. Their prayers, if prayers they had, would not be petitions but acknowledgements, quiet harmonies offered to the deep earth in thanks for continued warmth and shelter. These would not be spoken words, but tones, vibrations sung softly into the walls until they merge with the stone. Over generations, these sounds would become part of the living geology, a faint hum within the rock, and the eternal hymn of gratitude. The core of their spirituality would be the belief that the earth is conscious, not as a thinking mind, but as a presence, a being that feels through the movements of tectonic plates and expresses itself through the flow of magma, the drip of underground rivers, and the pressure that shapes mountains. To them, every tremor would be the earth's voice, every earthquake a stirring of its vast dreams. They would not fear such events as disasters. They would see them as communication, as signs that the planet still moves and remembers. In their language, there might be no word for dead stone, for to them, all matter would be alive, every grain of sand containing a trace of awareness, every mineral capable of hearing the resonance of prayer. Temples in this world would not stand apart from nature. They would be carved directly into living rock, or perhaps left untouched, the architecture growing around natural formations instead of replacing them. In the largest of these spaces, glowing fungi and crystalline pillars would provide soft light, shimmering like constellations in the eternal dark. The air would be cool and heavy with moisture, and the sound of dripping water would echo endlessly through the halls. Ceremonies might take place in silence, the participants sitting upon the stone floor, feeling the vibrations that rise from deep below. For them, meditation would not be escape, but listening the act of aligning one's inner rhythm with that of the earth. Their spiritual teachers, the keepers of harmony, would be chosen not for eloquence or authority, but for sensitivity. These would be individuals capable of feeling the faintest movements within the stone, of sensing the approach of tremors long before they occur, of hearing the subtle frequencies that ripple through the world unseen. They would be both scientists and mystics, interpreters of vibration who bridge the gap between the physical and the spiritual. To study the planet's heat, to measure its breath, would be an act of devotion. Knowledge and reverence would be one and the same. The people of this civilization would likely believe in cycles not of birth and death as opposites, but as continuations of one another. To die would not be to vanish, but to return to the earth's body, to dissolve into its minerals, its gases, its warmth. They might hold that consciousness itself disperses and rejoins the planet's vast awareness, a merging rather than an ending. In this view, every life would be a note in the earth's long song, and death would simply be a return to the larger melody. Their rituals for the dead would thus be gentle, perhaps involving the release of bodies into warm subterranean waters or mineral springs, where flesh becomes crystal and bone becomes part of the stone's memory. Nothing would be lost. Everything would transform. Their mythology would be filled with stories of emergence and return. The oldest tales might speak of ancestors who rose from molten caverns into the world above, only to retreat again when the light became too harsh. Others might tell of the first luminous beings who learned to coax light from stone, creating harmony between the living and the lifeless. These myths would serve not to explain origins in the literal sense, but to remind the people that they are children of the planet, born of its pressure, fed by its heat, and destined always to remain within its care. They might have symbols carved into their walls, spirals and concentric circles representing the flow of energy from the core to the surface. These symbols would appear everywhere on tools, on clothing, on the ceilings of gathering halls, reminders of their place within the cycle of life and heat. To them, the spiral would not merely be a pattern but a philosophy. Everything moves inward and outward in eternal rhythm. The movement of magma beneath their feet, the breath of a newborn child, the cooling of a crystal, all would follow the same sacred curve. Even their sense of morality would arise from this spiritual understanding of balance. To act selfishly or destructively would not be seen as a sin in the abstract but as a disharmony, a disruption of the resonant equilibrium that sustains life. Justice would not be retributive, but restorative, a process of returning balance to the collective vibration. Those who cause harm would not be punished through isolation, but retuned through meditation, sound, and service until their frequency aligns once more with the community. Theirs would be a world without dogma, where right and wrong are not decreed by authority but felt in the body as resonance or dissonance. To them, divinity would be everywhere, not in a heaven above, but in every drop of condensation, every vein of quartz, every faint hum of the earth's inner fire. The act of breathing itself would be sacred, for it would be seen as a partnership between body and planet. Inhale, and you draw in the earth's essence. Exhale, and you return part of yourself to it. Meditation would involve breathing in time with the rhythmic pulse of water dripping from the stalactites, a practice of communion with the slow patience of geology. Their spiritual art might consist of patterns drawn in mineral dust upon the floor of their temples, mandalas that glow softly under the bioluminescent light. These patterns would not be permanent. They would be erased and redrawn during each ceremony, symbolizing the transient yet eternal nature of life. The act of creation would matter more than the result. Each stroke of dust would be a prayer, each erasure an offering, and there would be legends, gentle, enduring ones of beings who live deeper still, closer to the planet's molten heart. These entities would not be gods in the sense of ruling powers, but embodiments of the Earth's moods and movements. Some might represent warmth and renewal, others pressure and transformation. The deep dwellers would tell their children that these beings dream within the magma, shaping the flow of minerals and life. When the ground trembles or the air grows warmer, they would say the earth is shifting in its sleep, dreaming of renewal. To live with such beliefs would be to exist in a state of perpetual reverence. There would be no separation between the sacred and the ordinary, for even the act of walking, of touching the wall, of drinking water would be a sacred exchange. Every gesture would affirm their gratitude for the balance that keeps them alive. To them, spirituality would not be a practice to return to, but a constant awareness, a quiet, glowing understanding that they are not apart from the earth but part of its consciousness, as inseparable as flame from fire. And perhaps, if ever they cease to be, their faith would remain embedded in the stone, encoded in the hum of the planet. The vibrations of their chants, their songs, their whispered gratitude might continue to echo faintly in the deep crust, too low for human ears but eternal nonetheless. The spirit of the earth, which they revered and became one with, would remember them not as a lost civilization, but as a dream. It once had a dream of harmony, still resonating somewhere far below, in the slow, luminous heart of the world. 17. The language of stone and silence. In a world without sunlight or wind, where words dissolve before they travel far, language itself would have to evolve differently. In the deep earth, where the air is heavy and the rock listens, communication would become an art of vibration, a language not spoken but felt. It would be the language of stone and silence, shaped by resonance rather than sound, by touch rather than sight. For the people of this imagined civilization, to speak would mean more than to send words into the air. It would mean to align oneself with the rhythm of the world, to let meaning move through one's body and into the surrounding earth. Every message would carry the memory of the speaker's breath, heartbeat, and intention. Words in this sense would not be noise, but music carefully tuned to the harmony of the living planet. Their earliest language might have begun with simple pulses, rhythmic strikes upon stone, deliberate and patterned. Over time, these vibrations would take on layers of meaning, evolving into a complex form of communication where emotion, direction, and memory could all be conveyed in a single sequence of tones. A person might touch a wall lightly, sending ripples through it that another could interpret far away, as one might read the distant roll of thunder. In such a world, walls would not be barriers but instruments. The planet itself would carry their words. To live here would mean to listen constantly, not for volume, but for the subtleties of rhythm and resonance that weave the unseen connections between beings. Silence, in this culture, would not mean absence. It would be an active presence, the space between vibrations, the stillness that gives shape to sound. The people would not fear it. They would cherish it. Silence would be the medium through which truth is heard. In a society that lives through resonance, noise would be disruption, an imbalance that distorts understanding. Thus, they would learn from a young age to speak with precision, to listen deeply, and to recognize that meaning lies not only in what is said but in what is left unsaid. Their greatest poets might be those who can say the most with the fewest notes, whose words echo long after they have faded. Their language would have no written form in the traditional sense, for writing as we know it relies on light and contrast. Instead, they would record their words in texture and vibration. A smooth panel of stone might carry a message encoded in patterns of carved grooves and ridges, designed not for the eye but for the hand. To read such a text would mean tracing it, slowly with the fingertips, feeling the rhythm of its design. The language would exist as a tactile symphony, part sculpture, part sound. Perhaps their historians would preserve knowledge in resonant chambers, where the shape of the room itself stores information, each curve holding a tone that corresponds to a memory. When one enters such a place and speaks, the echoes might awaken those memories, releasing them as vibrations that can be felt rather than heard. Over centuries, this system would grow in complexity. Language would merge with architecture, with art, with ritual. A corridor might hum faintly with an old story, its walls tuned to vibrate when touched or sung to at a specific pitch. Temples might hold vast speaking stones, resonant slabs that respond to human touch with deep harmonic tones. The people would treat these structures not as tools but as companions, partners in conversation. Communication, in such a world, would not be limited to the living. The very earth would participate, echoing the messages of its inhabitants. Their interpersonal communication would also reflect this deep attunement. They might touch one another's hands or shoulders as they speak, allowing vibrations to pass directly through skin. Words would carry layers of emotion through subtle tremors and tones. A greeting might be a gentle pulse against the palm, while gratitude could be a slow, steady vibration, like a heartbeat shared. Emotional nuance would replace verbal complexity. A single harmonic gesture could say more than a long speech. In this way, language would be intimate, embodied, and deeply connected to empathy. To communicate would mean to resonate, to find the frequency that harmonizes with another's being. The tone of their language would likely be low, suited to the density of air and rock. Their voices might resemble the murmuring of water or the faint song of wind through a narrow tunnel. When they speak, it would sound like the earth itself, breathing deep, steady, and soft. They would favor vowels that flow rather than consonants that break, creating a speech pattern that feels like a chant, an unbroken melody. When groups gather, their collective voices might blend into a resonant drone, forming a sound that fills the cavern and vibrates through every listener's bones. In these moments, speech would become indistinguishable from song, and communication would transcend language, becoming a shared vibration of being. Their storytellers, revered as both teachers and keepers of memory, would use this vibrational speech to shape their art. A narrative might not unfold in linear fashion, but through layered harmonics, different frequencies representing different characters or moments. Listeners would not merely hear the story, they would feel it as waves moving through their bodies, intertwining with their heartbeat. Some tales might last hours, some entire nights, the audience resting in stillness as the story resonates through the chamber. When it ends, silence would return like a closing phrase, sealing the story into the stone. The next time someone stands in that same place and hums softly, perhaps the echoes would recall fragments of the tale, faint but eternal. Over time, their entire philosophy of being would be rooted in this understanding of sound and silence. To them, every interaction would carry a vibrational consequence. Kindness would have a frequency, as would anger or sorrow. To live ethically would mean to keep one's frequency in harmony with others, to speak and act in ways that sustain balance. Their moral teachings might say that discord, whether emotional or social, sends out tremors that can weaken the very stone that holds their world together. Harmony, on the other hand, strengthens it. In this sense, the health of their civilization would depend on the harmony of its people, both literally and spiritually. When two people form a deep bond, they might express it not through words of affection, but through shared resonance, a private pattern of tones or vibrations that only they know. Families or groups could develop collective harmonics, their voices blending in ways that identify them as kin. Over generations, these resonances might even shape the environment, the walls subtly adapting to the frequencies most often produced within them. Thus, homes would remember their inhabitants, carrying the faint echo of every conversation, every song, every heartbeat. The world itself would become a library of lived experience. Even their dreams, one might imagine, would be filled with sound. The sleeping mind, surrounded by the hum of the earth, would drift in rhythm with the planet's natural frequencies. Dreamers might hear melodies of stone or conversations between the elements, the slow speaking of water to metal, of heat to pressure. Upon waking, they might interpret these vibrations as messages or prophecies, understanding that the earth communicates in its own quiet language, one that reveals itself only to those who have learned to listen without expectation. And so, their language, their silence, and their culture would all become reflections of the same truth, that communication is not confined to speech or symbols, but woven into the very structure of existence. The people of the depths would not think of words as tools to express meaning, but as extensions of themselves, living vibrations in harmony with a living planet. When they speak, the world listens. When they fall silent, the world continues their song. In the end, the language of stone and silence would be the purest form of connection, a dialogue between life and matter, between thought and being. It would remind them constantly that to exist is to resonate, to send and receive waves in the endless medium of time. Perhaps that is what the earth itself is doing now, as we walk upon its surface, unaware of the messages that travel through its depths. Perhaps the echoes of that ancient language still drift beneath us, carried through layers of stone, waiting for someone to listen not with ears, but with the quiet of the soul. 18. The hidden histories of the deep. Beneath the crust, in the silent chambers where no sunlight ever falls, history would not be written in ink or paint, but in the enduring language of stone. The people of the depths, if they existed, would measure their past not in the rise and fall of empires, but in the slow transformation of their world, in the growth of minerals, the flow of water, the shift of the earth's breath. Their history would be alive within the walls that surrounded them, recorded in layers and textures, in vibrations and echoes that carried the memory of every sound ever made. For them, the past would not be distant or lost. It would be a living presence, folded into the fabric of the present moment, just as each layer of rock contains the trace of everything that came before. In such a civilization, memory would be sacred. To remember would not simply mean to recall, but to preserve balance, to ensure that the harmony of their existence continued unbroken. The keepers of history would not be chroniclers in the surface sense, nor would they keep scrolls or tablets. They would be the listeners and the interpreters, those who could hear the faint resonances of time. By placing their hands upon the walls of a chamber, or lowering their ears to the ground, they would perceive the whispers of the past, faint tremors left behind by voices long gone. The earth, in their understanding, never forgets. Each vibration, no matter how soft, leaves an imprint in the stone, and through careful listening, one might still hear the echoes of ancestors who sang into the walls 1,000 generations ago. It would be through these echoes that they would reconstruct their history. When a child asked where their people came from, the answer would not be a written story, but an experience. They would be brought to an ancient cavern where the air carries an old hum, a tone that has lingered for millennia. The elders would tell them to listen not for words, but for feeling. The vibration would rise and fall in slow patterns, filled with meaning only the heart can grasp. This, the elder might say softly, is the sound of our beginning. The child would understand then that history is not something to be told, it is something to be felt, to be absorbed through the skin like warmth. The oldest histories would be etched into architecture itself. Great halls carved from living rock might bear patterns that are more than decoration spirals, waves, and lines that record geological events, migrations, or transformations in their society. To our eyes, they would appear abstract, but to those who live there, each shape would tell a story. A series of rising curves might represent a time of growth when the Earth's heat was generous and crops of fungi flourished. A downward sweep might mark the age when water receded or a tunnel collapsed, forcing them to adapt and move deeper. Their history would not glorify conquest or invention, but survival, adaptation, and harmony with the unpredictable moods of the planet that cradled them. They would also keep their stories in sound. Certain chambers might be known as memory caverns, where the acoustics are tuned to preserve vibrations for generations. Within these spaces, every word spoken is captured and held, returning in subtle echoes long after the speaker is gone. The people might gather there during moments of transition, births, deaths, or great discoveries to speak their truths into the air, knowing that the walls will remember. Over centuries, these chambers would become living archives, filled with the overlapping resonance of countless voices. To enter one would be to walk into a chorus of the past, to hear the hum of continuity stretching back beyond any single life. Their perception of time would differ entirely from ours. On the surface, we measure time in years, centuries, or the fleeting pace of progress. But in the depths, where change is imperceptibly slow, time would be a gentle spiral rather than a line. To them, history would not be divided into before and after, but seen as layers of a single eternal present. Events from long ago would feel as close as those of yesterday, their vibrations still circulating through the stone. The people might describe their past as something that moves with them, a shadow of sound that follows every action. To live would mean to participate in history continuously, adding one's own vibration to the chorus of all that has ever been. The telling of these histories would be an act of reverence, performed not for entertainment or instruction, but for remembrance. Their storytellers, or rather, their resonants, as they might be called, would not stand before their audience. Instead, they would sit among them, their voices blending with the murmurs of the group, their tones low and steady. As they speak, the words would ripple outward, touching the walls and ceilings, filling the space with gentle resonance. The listeners would close their eyes and feel the story move through them, becoming part of it. In this way, each retelling would strengthen the connection between people and place, between memory and matter. Not all their histories would be serene. The deep earth, though stable, is not without upheaval. There would have been times when tremors shook their world, when floods carved through tunnels, or when warmth grew too intense to bear. These events would not be forgotten, but they would not be remembered as disasters. Instead, they would be seen as transformations, moments when the planet itself demanded change. Their histories of hardship would be told with the same tenderness as their stories of peace, for to them, destruction and creation were two sides of the same cycle. The earth does not destroy without also remaking. Some of their legends might describe encounters with surface dwellers, faint myths of beings who live beneath an endless sky. To them, these stories would seem fantastical, tales of a world where time is divided by light and darkness, where the air moves freely and life races instead of flows. The deep dwellers might wonder if such creatures could truly exist, or if the stories are metaphors for dreams, visions of what the earth imagines in its quieter moments. They might speak of ancient migrations upward, of ancestors who sought to see this world of brilliance, and returned blinded, unable to endure its chaos. These tales would serve not as warnings, but as lessons in humility, and reminders that every world has its own balance, and that light is not always the highest form of life. Their understanding of ancestry would also differ from ours. They would not trace lineage through individuals or families, but through resonance. Each person would inherit not only physical traits, but frequencies, patterns of vibration passed through generations. To know one's ancestors would mean to feel their tones within oneself. During rites of remembrance, individuals might chant in unison, producing harmonics that reveal the blended voice of their lineage. The sound would fill the chamber, merging into a deep, singular tone, the voice of continuity itself. In that resonance, they would sense the presence of all who came before, not as spirits apart from them, but as vibrations living within their bones. In their deepest myths, they might believe that history itself is cyclical, that civilizations rise and fall not only on the surface but within the earth as well. Perhaps they tell of ancient peoples who once lived deeper still, closer to the molten heart, whose knowledge was immense but who dissolved back into the planet when their harmony was lost. The deep dwellers would see themselves as part of that continuum, one layer among many, destined to fade, but certain that others would come after them. To them, immortality would not lie in preservation, but in participation, in becoming part of the Earth's unending evolution. And when their civilization finally passed, when their halls grew silent and their lights went dark, their histories would remain. The walls would still hum faintly with the memory of their songs, the stones would still carry the echo of their hands, and the rivers would still follow the channels they carved. Even if no living being remembers them, the planet does. For in the deep earth, nothing is ever truly lost. Every vibration, every gesture, every thought leaves a trace. The earth holds it all in its quiet, patient heart, a memory not of words, but of existence itself. Thus, the hidden histories of the deep are not merely stories of people and events, but the slow accumulation of being life, recorded in resonance, in pressure, in warmth. To the surface world they may remain forever unknown, but to the planet they are eternal, echoing softly through the stone, blending with the hum of time. And perhaps, if one listens closely enough in the stillness of a cave, one might hear them, the faint, unbroken murmur of a people who once lived in perfect harmony with the earth, whose history is not written, but sung in silence. 19. When the surface was forgotten, there would have come a time, in that slow and endless age of the deep, when the memory of the surface world faded completely. Once, perhaps, it had been a distant legend, a story passed down in faint fragments, speaking of light so fierce it blinded, and skies so wide they swallowed thought. But with the passing of countless generations, even those stories would lose their meaning. The people of the depths, surrounded by stone and warmth and the steady heartbeat of the planet, would begin to think of the surface not as a place they had lost, but as a myth they had outgrown. The upward paths would be sealed, the last tunnels closed by slow collapses of rock and silence, and with that, the final thread connecting them to the open air would dissolve. The surface would become a word without substance, a sound in the language of dreams. As this forgetting took hold, it would not bring sorrow, but peace. The deep dwellers would not long for what they could not imagine. They would have everything they needed within their enclosed world air, renewed by their gardens of fungi and moss, water drawn from the patient flow of the planet's veins, light born from bioluminescent life and crystalline fire. Their existence would be self-contained, perfectly circular. They would no longer measure their worth by what lay above or below. Instead, they would find meaning in stillness, in the balance between heat and shadow, in the quiet exchange between body and stone. To forget the surface would be to complete their transformation, to become fully of the earth, no longer a species that dwells upon it, but one that dwells within. The earliest signs of this forgetting might appear in language. Words once used to describe the world above would lose their relevance. Terms for sky, sun, cloud, or rain would fade from memory. The concept of up would lose its dominance, replaced by the language of inward and outward, of near and far, of vibration and warmth. They might retain a faint echo of the old vocabulary, used only in ritual words spoken without full comprehension, kept alive out of reverence for their mystery. Over time, even those would blur into sound, becoming part of the songs sung during ceremonies of reflection. The loss of meaning would not be mourned. It would be accepted as part of the natural flow of forgetting, as gentle and inevitable as erosion. The myths that once linked them to the surface would slowly shift in tone. What was once memory would turn to metaphor. The world above might become a staya, symbol of awakening, or of an earlier, less harmonious age. The surface could come to represent chaos, a place of unpredictable cycles, of blinding light and restless storms, where life had no stillness. They might describe it as a realm of dissonance, ruled by a sun that never sleeps and shadows that never rest. In their philosophy, the deep would be seen as the heart of the earth, calm, eternal, self-knowing, while the surface would become its fleeting dream, a place too fast and too bright to endure. The forgetting, therefore, would not feel like loss, but purification. Generations later, no one would remember the idea of stars or open air. Children born into the deep would never ask where the ceiling ends, for to them, the world would feel whole. They would see beauty in the glow of crystal veins, in the silver shimmer of underground lakes, in the rhythmic sound of dripping water echoing through their chambers. They would know the weight of stone above them, not as burden, but as comfort, the gentle pressure of the earth's embrace. Their world would be measured not by distance, but by resonance, not by horizon, but by harmony. And so, while the surface sky still stretched endlessly above, its blue unimagined by any living member of this civilization, the deep earth would thrive in quiet completeness. The forgetting would also shape their sense of time. Without the alternation of day and night, they would cease to think in cycles of light. Time would instead be felt as rhythm, the slow beating of water through caverns, the distant rumble of the earth's core, the pulse of collective breathing in their gatherings. Theirs would be a culture that measures existence in moments of resonance rather than in hours or years. The forgetting of the surface would erase the anxiety of passing days. There would be no sunrise to chase, no sunset to mourn, only the unbroken continuity of presence. Perhaps a few rare individuals, listeners, dreamers, or the Strektham, deeply attuned, might still feel faint memories stirring in their sleep. They might see visions of brightness too vast to name, of movement and wind. Upon waking, they would be unable to describe what they had seen. They would speak of it in riddles of a sky that opens forever, of warmth that burns instead of nourishes. Their listeners would regard them with quiet fascination, not disbelief but wonder. Such dreams would be interpreted not as recollections of a forgotten world, but as visitations from the consciousness of the earth itself, a reminder that even in its calm depths, the planet holds multitudes. Over thousands of years, this distance from the surface would become complete. The deep dwellers would live in a world entirely defined by stability and closeness. Their architecture, their philosophy, their very biology would be adapted to the interior eyes, large and sensitive to the dimmest light, lungs efficient in dense air, skin pale and luminous like the crystals they cultivate. They would not see darkness as absence, but as space full of unseen life. What they could not perceive with sight, they would understand through sound, vibration, and touch. Their senses, refined through countless generations, would connect them to the planet's pulse more deeply than any creature of the surface could imagine. In their collective memory, the idea of above would vanish. The concept of a separate world beyond the stone would become as implausible as flight to a fish. They would believe that the deep earth is infinite, a continuous labyrinth of warmth and stillness extending forever. The few who sense the faint pull of upward curiosity would be regarded as poets, those who dream in impossible directions. Their art might depict mysterious openings, shafts of unseen light, or winds that move without cause. These images would not be understood as literal but as spiritual metaphors, representations of inner awakening rather than physical ascent. The desire to reach the surface would become a yearning for understanding, not for exploration. In this world of forgetting, peace would reign not through ignorance but through contentment. The people would know themselves as part of the earth's eternal system, needing nothing beyond what it gives. Their myths would teach that all life seeks to return inward, toward the quiet centre of being. The surface, if remembered at all, would be the echo of restlessness, the outermost layer of existence, an idea left behind by ancestors who once wandered and then found home. To them, the deep would represent completion, the perfect stillness achieved when movement and searching cease. And yet, even as the memory of the surface faded into legend, its traces would remain hidden in the earth itself. Fossils embedded in rock, remnants of ancient rivers, faint differences in mineral composition, all would quietly tell the story of another world above. The deep dwellers, perhaps, would study these relics with curiosity, sensing that they belonged to a different era. But they would interpret them, not as remnants of their own past, but as evidence of the Earth's infinite creativity, proof that it once dreamt differently, shaping forms and lives that no longer exist. In their wisdom, they would never seek to recreate or reclaim these things. To them, the Earth's memory is enough. In time, the surface and the depths would become completely estranged, two separate realms, unaware of one another. Above, under sunlight, humanity might thrive, build, and forget its own origins. Below, in the darkness, another humanity, slower, quieter, wiser, would hum with the rhythm of the world's hidden heart. Each would be unaware of the other's existence, yet connected through the same planet, sharing the same pulse. The deep civilization, at peace with its forgetting, would continue to live, to sing, to listen, and so the surface would become myth, and the myth would become silence, not a silence of emptiness, but of completion. The forgetting would not be tragedy, but evolution, the moment when memory folds fully into being. The people of the depths would no longer need to remember the light, for they would have found illumination within. The earth would keep them, and in return, they would keep the earth a harmony so profound that even time itself would seem to pause to listen. 20. The last light of the deep. In the depths of the earth, where silence is thick and time moves with the slow patience of stone, there would come a moment long after memory has faded, after stories have softened into myths, and myths into simple songs, when the last light would begin to dim. It would not happen suddenly. Nothing in the deep ever does. Change there is like the slow cooling of magma or the quiet growth of crystals, a process so gradual that generations might pass before it is understood. Yet, little by little, the glow that once filled the caverns, the soft bioluminescence of their gardens, the shimmering crystals that had long pulsed with warmth would begin to fade. Like embers settling into ash, the deep dwellers, in their calm wisdom, would not fear this fading. They would notice it first as a change in tone. The air would feel cooler, the walls less alive to the touch. Where once the gentle hum of energy pulsed through every chamber, there would now be longer intervals of stillness. The people, attuned to every vibration, would sense that something vast and old within the earth was shifting. Perhaps the geothermal veins that sustained them were closing, or the balance that had kept their world warm was turning toward rest. The last light, they would understand, was not dying, but returning, withdrawing into the greater body of the planet, as all things eventually do. As the glow receded, their world would transform. The familiar glimmers that danced across the stone would become rarer, concentrated only in the deepest sanctuaries where warmth still gathered. The great halls that once shimmered with gentle colour would now lie in twilight, lit only by faint reflections from still pools. It would be a time of quiet adaptation, not of panic. The people would continue their rituals, their songs, their slow, resonant lives. They would gather together more often, sharing warmth and breath, listening to the deeper hum that still emanated from below. To them, the fading of light would not mean the end of life, but the beginning of a new kind of seeing, a return to the truest darkness, the original state of the earth before all illumination was born. In this growing dimness, their senses would sharpen further. Eyes that had long been sensitive to faint radiance would now rely more on sound, touch, and the subtle feeling of vibration. Their society, already built on resonance, would become one of pure listening. Communication would deepen into something nearly telepathic, where meaning passes through skin and stone rather than through air. They would feel one another's presence as patterns of warmth and pressure, as living extensions of the same great body. In the absence of light, they would become light to each other, not through sight but through awareness. Their understanding of illumination would evolve beyond the physical, transforming into something inward, a recognition that the glow they once tended in their gardens was only a reflection of the energy that lives within every being. The last luminous gardens, tended with reverence, would become places of pilgrimage. Their bioluminescent fungi, dim but steady, would be cared for like sacred fires. Families would travel from distant caverns to see them, to sit in their soft light, to remember the long ages of radiance that once filled their world. They would bring songs of gratitude rather than mourning, understanding that this light, too, belongs to the cycle. Children would listen to the elders' stories about the brightness of old times, and though they could not imagine such brilliance, they would feel its echo in the warmth of those who told it. To them, the glow would not be a symbol of loss, but of completion, the final note in a song that has always been fading into silence. In their philosophy, they would come to see darkness not as the opposite of light, but as its fulfillment. They would teach that light exists only to reveal the beauty of darkness, that once darkness is fully understood, the need for illumination disappears. As the last luminous chambers dimmed, the people would speak of a coming union, a time when all boundaries between self and world, between perception and reality, would dissolve. To them, the fading light would signify that the earth was calling them inward, inviting them to join in its eternal rest. This belief would not inspire despair, but serenity. They would prepare not for extinction but for merging. Perhaps there would be a final ceremony, held in the oldest of their halls, the first chamber their ancestors had carved when they descended into the deep. Its walls, smooth and vast, would still carry the faint hum of ancient voices. The remaining light, soft as breath, would illuminate the faces of those who gathered there. No words would be spoken, none would be needed. The people would sit in silence, feeling the warmth of the stone beneath them, the pulse of the planet that had sheltered them for ages beyond counting. Slowly, one by one, they would begin to hum a single low tone that resonates through their bodies, through the walls, through the deep heart of the earth. Others would join, and the sound would grow until it becomes indistinguishable from the natural vibration of the world itself. As the light dwindled to a faint shimmer, their song would continue, a hymn not of farewell but of return. It would echo softly through the tunnels, carried by water and stone, until it became part of the planet's own resonance. Long after the last voice faded, the vibration would persist, seeping into the rock, becoming one with the deep hum that has always existed. In that moment, the boundary between life and world would vanish entirely. The people, their culture, their light, all would become one with the earth's infinite stillness. The chambers would remain empty yet alive. The architecture they had built, shaped perfectly to the planet's rhythms, would endure as silent fossils of intention. The carvings on the walls, the patterns of resonance etched into the stone, would continue to hum faintly when touched by the movement of water or the subtle tremor of tectonic breath. The world above would continue its cycles of day and night, unaware of the civilization that once thrived far below. And yet, deep within, the earth would remember, for every vibration ever made lingers in its memory. The song of the deep dwellers, the hymn of their final gathering, would still echo, inaudible to human ears but eternal in the stone. It is comforting to imagine that their end was not an ending at all, but a return to origin, that the last light did not vanish but sank inward, merging with the molten glow of the planet's heart. Perhaps, in some secret way, that light continues to shine, not in colour or form, but as warmth, the gentle heat we feel when we touch the ground, the quiet pulse that sustains the living earth. Their essence, absorbed into the planet, might still guide the flow of minerals, the shaping of crystals, the rhythm of tectonic motion. The earth, ever patient, would carry their legacy not as memory, but as energy, a whisper of consciousness that endures beneath our feet. And so, their civilization would conclude not with collapse, but with harmony. The last light would fade, not extinguished, but transformed, its glow becoming the warmth of the core, its people becoming the stillness of the stone. In their end, they would complete the cycle that began with their descent, from surface to depth, from brightness to shadow, from sound to silence. Their story, like all stories of life, would return to the earth that gave it shape. If one listens closely in a quiet cave, far from the noise of the surface, perhaps a faint vibration can still be felt, the ghost of that final song, the resonance of a people who learn to live in perfect peace with their world. It hums softly, endlessly, beneath the layers of time. It is not a lament, but a lullaby, the last light of the deep still glowing unseen within the heart of the earth.